The hero of this story is called Kyle, and when he wakes up in an unfamiliar room, he grabs the maid by the arm to find out what is going on. He demands to know who she is and why she's in his room. The young maid fearfully reveals her name and reminds him that he had once saved her. Then she apologizes for entering his room without permission, as she didn't realize that he was sleeping. Kyle only grips her hand harder as he repeats the name in confusion, causing her to let out a yelp of pain. It seems like he had gone a little bit too far, and that pushes him out of his sudden anger at her. He releases her hand and apologizes for his sudden outburst, and thankfully, she's still alright despite the pain in her hand. Kyle seems to be in a daze after waking up as he shakily glances around his messy room. What on earth is going on, and why is this kid in a maid outfit? He notices the medicine and meal on the countertop and asks about it. Urziel confirms that it is his medicine and meal for the day. However, his porridge has gone cold, so she would need to go warm it up and bring it back for him. With that, she leaves, and Kyle is only more confused about the whole situation. Did she say that was his medicine? And what in the world happened to his body? He carefully steps down from the bed and walks to the nearest mirror to look at himself for the first time. This is the face of a video game character, not him. The one inside the body of Kyle Seltarian was not Kyle at all. He ruffled his hair in panic as he stared in the mirror. Lee Hyun-woo, a popular game streamer from another world, had somehow teleported into the body of a character from a game he often played named Fantasy Defense. At that moment, he realized that he had somehow woken up in another world. The character Kyle Seltarian is a video game NPC that appears in his favorite game. He is the youngest son of the Seltarian Marquis family, which is known for their swordsmanship. As one of the characters from the Seltarian family, he was involved in many early game events. In events where he interacts with the protagonist of the story, he always gets properly beaten, and he's usually defeated in a single blow by a minion-level monster summoned by a villain. In summary, he's not even part of the main cast of NPC characters. He's an absolute extra role. That kind of character is who Lee Hyun-woo had awoken as. He decides to test if he's dreaming by pinching himself in the cheek. The immediate pain and the red bump on his face afterward proves that he, in fact, is not dreaming. This was all real. Now that he is sure that this is reality and not some sort of twisted dream, he continues to stare at himself in the mirror in exasperation. How could this have happened to him? Lee Hyun-woo, who was once the #1 player in the Fantasy Defense World Rankings, has now become an insignificant and worthless character. Fantasy Defense is a virtual reality game that will become a hit globally by 2030. Thanks to its devilishly difficult levels, no one had cleared it even after 10 years of it being released. On top of that, it was devilishly fun, and its addictiveness continued to grow its popularity. In the game, there were scores assigned based on gameplay style and quest achievement on a global ranking scale. The scores rise significantly when rare quests are completed, or rare items are obtained. And the person who stood on top of it all after investing 10 years of his life into the game was Lee Hyun-woo, the most popular streamer for the game. He knew rare magic circles and legendary combination formulas that others didn't. He was truly the living dictionary of the game, and he had overwhelming scores that no one could ever hope to beat. And for someone so great to be possessed by such a weak and useless character can only be a cruel twist of fate. This is a game where even the protagonist with exceptional talents can't clear the higher levels. So how is he supposed to survive? More than that, since he has replayed this game so many times at this point, he already knows the fate of Kyle Seltarian very clearly. The ultimate goal of Fantasy Defense is to stop the forces of darkness. The one who summoned those dark forces was Adolf, the second son of the Seltarian Marquis family. The second son was aiming for the position of head of the Seltarian family, and he hoped to use dark powers to incite a rebellion. In the end, the entire Seltarian estate falls into ruin and becomes a base for the dark forces that have been eyeing human territory for a long time. In the midst of all this chaos, Kyle Seltarian, who was completely powerless, was slaughtered mercilessly by those same forces. Maybe if he just leaves the estate before the rebellion even breaks out, that would be enough to keep him alive. That's just a temporary solution, though, and the real problem lies elsewhere. This new noble body of his is suffering from a disease called hermimum. It's a disease that blocks the mana pathways in the body. In this world, mana is the source of aura and magic, which are both essential for survival. Mana is as important as blood in the body, and those affected by hermimum have blocked the pathways in their body, which means that they fail to receive the nutrients needed for survival and growth. That typically means that they die before the age of 20. The only treatment for hermimum is to absorb the mana from the natural environment in order to overcome the disease. However, since the pathways are blocked, they cannot accept mana, and this hermimum is pretty much the same as having a terminal illness. Kyle Seltarian was diagnosed with this terminal illness at a young age, and he has been filled with despair ever since. The fear of death, the anxiety, and the despair over the limited time he has left loomed over him like a shadow, and because of that, his personality became twisted. Before he knew it, he became a disgrace to his family, and his father ordered him to stay in his room and reflect on his actions. There, he continued to boil in rage at the thought that his family thought he was a joke, and someone who could easily be taken advantage of. His anger at the world and at everyone in it grew and grew until he eventually died. In other words, the guy was hopeless. Even in the game, it was always clear that he was a hopeless character. Even though he was a terminally ill patient, his horrible personality is the main trigger for people to give up on him. To summarize the situation, our boy now has possessed an incredibly hopeless character who has no talent or ability for either swordsmanship or magic. No lifespan left, a terrible personality, an awful reputation, and to top it all off, he is confined to his room by the head of the family. This is like starting nightmare mode on a new RPG game. From the start, he is already ruined. Whether he stays put in his room or tries to escape, the inevitable ending for him is death. How is he even supposed to survive in this world with those kinds of stats? Isn't it normal to get at least 1 or 2 cheat skills when you get reincarnated? It would be better if he at least had some kind of status window or something similar. As he contemplates what led him to this situation, bright blue orbs begin to shine around him. Just a moment ago, there was nothing like this in the area. Just where did this come from? The young noble reaches out carefully and touches the orb, which causes a burst of light to shoot out from his hand. Once it clears, a status window with a few key messages appears in front of him. He had awakened, and because of that, he will now receive 2 new talents, which include access to a status window and the Mind's Eye ability, which will be activated automatically from now on. As if it were summoned by him, the status window appears right in front of his eyes and shows the current stats of his new body. He has 2 new talents called Mana Pathways and Mind's Eye. What could Mana Pathways be, though? Well, for starters, Mind's Eye allows you to see the detailed specs of people and equipment around you. Mana Pathways, however, is a completely new talent that he had never heard of before. Judging from the name, it seems to be related to magic in some way. But magic talents are supposed to be under the Mana Companion talent. Even though he has never seen this talent before, his gamer intuition tells him that this talent is somehow superior to Mana Companion, and it might even be a top-tier talent. When he had the Mana Companion ability, he was never able to see anything like the orbs around him with his own eyes. This is pure mana energy itself, and if his guess is correct, he should be able to absorb it for himself. The noble reaches out his hand and touches one of the pure mana bubbles in front of him. Immediately, he does. He starts to feel the mana flowing through his body. It moves through his arm until it stops abruptly. It seems like this is one of the symptoms of the Hermamum disease. The blocked pathway stops the mana from fully going through his entire body. He was so close to feeling mana flowing through his body, and this was not going to stop him. Through sheer will alone, he starts to force the mana to move through the blockage by force. Through his command, he wills the mana to pierce through the blockage and force its way into the rest of his body. He makes the mana as sharp as a needle, then pushes it against the blockage, slowly pushing through until, finally, he starts to feel the mana flowing through his body. It's only up to his elbows for now. But if he continues to gather mana like this and push through each blockage the way he just did, then he'd be able to overcome Hermimu as well. Thanks to that, he will not die, and there will be hope for him after all. Back in the kitchen, Ursule has finished warming up her master's porridge. She has to hurry up and bring it back to him before it gets cold again. As she prepares to carry the food back up to meet him, a group of maids walks up to confront her. They tell her not to give that food to Kyle and stand blocking the door to the kitchen. Ursule looks at them a bit confused as the maids continue to explain that, as a protest to Lord Kyle's misdeeds against the maids, they have come together and decided to temporarily stop serving him. If he goes hungry for a few days, then maybe he will change his mind and his attitude towards them. So they order her to put the food down and comply with them. Ursule, on the other hand, can't be bothered with their protest. She tells them to do whatever they want to do while she continues to do her work. That response doesn't go well with the maids at all. One of them yells at her in anger to at least pretend to be nice. With that, she slaps the meal tray out of her hands and onto the floor. She asks if the young maid still thinks that she's some kind of mobile. She came from a ruined family and was sold into slavery, so how dare she talk back to her fellow maid? Ursule ignores her yelling while the other maid holds the angered one back. The young maid couldn't care less about the ramblings of her coworkers as she continued to clean the spilled food off the floor. That only angers the woman more, and she raises a hand to slap the child who was kneeling on the ground to clean up the mess. Just then, the door swings open, and a blonde-haired man walks into the room. The angry maid's hand freezes in midair. Everyone is shocked by Mr. Leonhardt's presence in the kitchen as he angrily demands to know just what exactly is going on in here. The other two only look at him in shock as he passes them to look at the mess on the floor and the younger girl struggling to clean it up. He sighs once he realizes that these two are just giving the young girl a hard time. The meal for Lord Kyle is already late, and she needs to hurry up and prepare another one to bring to him. Ursule accepts and leaves to go prepare another plate of food, while the two maids stand shyly to the side. Leonhardt turns angrily to them once she leaves, and it's clear that he's not impressed by what he just saw. Meanwhile, Kyle continues to look through his new abilities in the status menu. If he were to utilize Mind's Eye and Mana Pathways together, then it might even change the fate of the Marquis household, which was doomed for a gruesome downfall. He has been playing this game for 10 years at this point, and he has an advanced foresight level of information. Moreover, he was born with the great power and wealth of a nobleman. With all these things on his side, then it might actually be possible to stop the forces of darkness from taking over. It seems like there are big things ahead of him. But first, he has to overcome his Hermamu by opening the mana passages and learning magic. Mana Delay, for instance, is a talent specialized in magic. With his new talent for magic, it would be better for him to become a wizard than a knight. The second thing he has to do is prevent the downfall of the Marquis family. Since he's part of this family, if the family does well, then so will he. The Marquis of Celtrian will be a very solid support in terms of reputation, skill, wealth, and everything he could possibly ask for. Since the territory is located in the outskirts, he doesn't have to worry about the situation in the capital. Finally, and the most important thing, he has to gather talented allies. In order to prepare for the massive darkness attack that he expects to happen in the near future, if he were to select a potentially talented person and make them his allies, then they would give him stronger power in return. That is how he's going to build his strength. However, firstly, in order to gather talent, he needs to look around for someone close by. Since he is the Marquis of Celta Leon, then he would have to start with Leonhardt, who was once a useful tank NPC while he played the game. As he continues to think about what he will do, a girl's voice calls out to him from the door. It's Ursule, who has returned with the food she went to prepare for him. His eyes widen as he sees her, and he realizes that this is the kid that came into his room earlier, although he can't seem to remember her name. She silently walks back to his counter to prepare his food and medicine while he struggles to remember. Suddenly, the status window pops up with exactly the information he needs. It classifies her as a low-ranking enemy and shows detailed information about her stats and her talents. Her characteristics are being cold-hearted and hard-working, but it's her talent that catches his eye. She has a talent called the Spirit's Eternal Friend. That's the highest level talent in the spirit magic category. He continues to stare at her stats until she turns to look at him and realizes that he has also been staring at her. She nervously tells him to enjoy his meal before stepping back to allow him to eat. Kyle watches her intently and wonders why someone with the talent to become a genius psychic is working so hard as a maid. Well, the answer to that happened a year ago at an auction. The auctioneer proudly introduces today's special item as Kyle sits in the crowd bitterly. She points the spotlight at a young girl who stands silently on stage. It's Ursule, and she's revealed to be the daughter of Baron Helheim, who was recently stripped of his title. Because she comes from a noble family, she's polite and smart, and the crowd is clearly interested in her. Thanks to that, as soon as the bids start, people begin to yell out their prices for the young girl. Sir Leonhardt, who is seated beside Kyle, suggests that they leave the auction since they should not stand for things like slave trading. Kyle, however, instead stands up and places a high bid of 300 gold. The price is so insane that the auctioneer stutters for a moment as he hears it. The knight beside him calls out to him in shock for even thinking of buying a slave, but the young noble shuts him up with a word. He will spend his money however he wants to. In his mind, his actions don't matter since his own father doesn't even care what he's doing. Then, with the crowd completely silent from his high bid, he walks over to the girl who looks at him with a blank expression on her face while her hands are shackled. He tells her that from now on, she belongs to him. Now that he had bought Ursule, he took her outside and released her shackles. With that, she was free to do whatever she wanted. He sets her free and tells her that she's no longer a slave now that he has bought her freedom. Kyle turns to leave with Sir Leonhardt by his side, but the girl calls out to him again. She thinks about it for a moment. Now that she had her freedom, she could go wherever she wanted. But since he said that he owns her, she wants to go with him. Kyle scoffs and tells her to do whatever she wishes. Back in the present, Hyunwoo realizes that he has just gotten a glimpse into Kyle's memories. With that, he understands how the young maid had gotten into the Marquis household. Ursule had been sold at an auction, and Kyle had bought her in order to set her free. She must have been through so much at such a young age. Either way, the fact that he also has Kyle's memories shows that he had completely merged with him. He can even feel the emotions Kyle had toward Ursule at the time. A sense of solidarity from both of them sharing a fate that they didn't choose, as well as their mutual feelings of being abandoned in the world alone. Those were what pushed Kyle to do what he did and buy her. He decides to stop thinking too much so he can enjoy the food in front of him. He takes the first bite, and his eyes sparkle in joy. The meal was delicious. He asks Ursule if she is the one who made this herself. The girl shakily replies that she was the one who had made the porridge. It seems like she's still shy about it, especially since she knows how he can get when he's angry at something or someone. But to her surprise, he instead compliments her on being a good cook and asks her to make the same dish for him again next time. Ursule is momentarily shocked by this and looks away shyly. A status menu opens up over her head and shows that her affection has gone up to 35 thanks to his compliment. Even though she had a bit of affection, considering the dramatic encounter they had previously, her affection wasn't that high. It's not very surprising though, since she must have witnessed all of Kyle's delinquent behavior. The fact that she had any affection for him at all was a miracle in itself. In the game he used to play, there was no spirit summoner named Ursiel. That means that in the main game storyline, she was never able to fully develop her abilities as a spirit summoner. And instead, she got caught up in the internal rebellion of the Marquis household, where she lost her life. This time, he wasn't going to let that happen. There is no way he would let such a gem slip away, especially while she's right in front of him. He decides to start working head-on. He asks her if she has ever thought about learning spirit summoning. She looks at him, confused about why he suddenly wants her to learn such a thing. The young noble says he wants her to learn it because he thinks she has a talent for it. She, on the other hand, has never imagined herself as having any talent for spirit summoning. That's probably because she hasn't been exposed to spirit summoning, even in her former household. Spirit summoning is known to be particularly expensive to teach and learn. So for a lower noble family, the cost of education would be a huge burden for them. That just means that he now needs to take matters into his own hands. He tells her that she's going to start learning spirit summoning, and she doesn't have a choice. After all, she belongs to him. Ursiel takes a gulp of saliva and looks away shyly as another notification window appears above her head, and her affection increases to 50%. A few days later, Kyle leaves his room and comes face to face with Sir Leonhardt. They stare each other down intently before the snow-haired noble asks the knight to let him through. Sir Leonhardt declines immediately, which only further upsets Kyle. He has been stuck in that room for way too long, and there's a way he was going to stay in that room for the rest of his life. Sir Leonhardt firmly tells him that he cannot leave until his father gives permission, especially after what had happened, and the Lord's last words to him. Kyle freezes for a second, and his mind wanders over all the arguments the Lord has had with him. The whole reason the room arrest rules were there was because they could no longer tolerate his constant troublemaking. But the more time he wastes here, the less time he has to get the mana particles that are floating around deeper within the house. Ever since he discovered that he could unblock the mana pathways by using the mana orbs that appear around his room, he has been absorbing all the particles that appear in his room every day. Although it wasn't enough to unblock the pathways instantly, mana has been accumulating in his body like experience points in a game, and his body gradually improved over time, but it is nowhere near enough to cure the Hermimu disease. To get more, he needed to leave his room and go outside to gather more mana. The young noble promises that he won't go very far, and he'll just walk in the forest nearby so he can exercise. The word exercise surprises Sir Leonhardt, who has never heard such a constructive reason from Kyle. That gets Kyle a bit upset, but Sir Leonhardt continues, saying that he has been tasked as the noble's personal knight for years, but this was the first time that he had ever heard him say something like that. It was at that moment that Kyle realized just how much of a delinquent he had been up until then. He had absolutely no credibility. Even with that, however, Leonhardt seemed to be some kind of unyielding wall. This man was tasked to be Kyle's personal guard, but originally he was a famous character in the game who was known to have a large amount of both defense and offense. He's highly skilled and has great potential, which means he can be raised up to the rank of captain. However, most players simply made him serve as a tank in their parties. Furthermore, due to his high loyalty and unbreakable trust, he was one of the most popular companion characters among players. In the original game, he becomes a wandering knight after the fall of the Marquis household, which allowed people to recruit him through events. For now though, since the Second Son's rebellion hadn't happened yet, he was still in the Seltarian mansion, working as Kyle's personal knight. It was such a waste to task such a promising talent like him with babysitting duty. Just what exactly were the Seltarian knights doing? Why on earth would they stick him in a dead-end place like this? He accidentally said that last part out loud, and Leonhardt takes offense after misunderstanding his words, as the delinquent is dissatisfied with him as a guard. The younger boy tries to explain that he's not dissatisfied with him, but Leonhardt instead just advises him to follow the orders of the Lord, his father. That's when Kyle realizes that the knight's loyalties don't lie with him. They lie with Lord Rempton Seltarian, his father. That was only natural after all. Who would want to stick with the delinquent younger son? He just can't accept that though. His next talent recruiting project starts with Sir Leonhardt. He asks the knight if he would be willing to try to persuade his father. The blonde man realizes that something has changed about Kyle's demeanor. Little does he know that, in actuality, he has caught the interest of the younger lord, and now the kid is determined to win his loyalty. He pushes a bit harder and asks if the knight will help him. Leonhardt isn't convinced, however. Here's something different about him somehow, but he just can't place his finger on it. He asks Kyle what he's scheming by acting so differently. That shows just how much he doesn't trust the delinquent. The kid has just been in his room for so long that his thoughts have changed. From now on, he has decided that he wants to live a long life. That shocks Leonhardt, who knows exactly why someone like Kyle can't live a long life. The white-haired boy is someone who had to give up everything because of his incurable Hermimu disease. Someone like him saying they want to live a long life, especially when it's unlikely that he will live past 20, was saddening to hear. He didn't have any magical talent, nor did he have any special swordsmanship skills. And by being the youngest, he also has no chance of inheriting the family. Even with all this, Lord Rempton decided to keep him by the child's side. The older nobleman once asked Leonhardt if there was any resentment for that decision that practically stagnated his career. He immediately answered that it would be an honor beyond words for someone in the Celtarian Knight Order to protect a direct descendant of the Marquis family. He plans to fulfill his duties faithfully as a man of loyalty. It's exactly because he was such a loyal man that Lord Rempton wants him by Kyle's side. In the Marca household, there is no one else that can be trusted to protect him. No one except the trustworthy and loyal Leonhardt. With that, the elder lord entrusts him to take care of the son of the house. The knight plans to obey that order till death, even as the child now pesters him for a chance to go outside and exercise. He continues to ask if he can go out and even suggests that the blonde knight tell the lord that he just wants to exercise. Leonhardt puts down a firm hand to stop him from moving anymore. He doesn't need to go outside to exercise, especially since he can exercise indoors as well. With no other choice, Kyle decides to try a more aggressive approach. He warns Leonhardt to move aside and not to let him repeat himself. All he needed to do was go outside and find some more mana cores so he could keep working on clearing his mana pathways. He gave Leonhardt a serious stare, and Leonhardt felt a strange aura coming from him. Once again, he kept on getting this feeling that something really was different about Lord Kyle. But even so, he had to stand his ground here no matter how much the young lord had changed overnight. He took a step forward and stood more confidently in front of the boy. The Marquis's order is absolute, and this applies to the young lord as well. However, if he really wanted to go outside, then he would have to get past him first. All of a sudden, Kyle felt a heavy killing intent flowing from the knight. It wasn't fair for Leonhardt to use killing intent on a child over just a request to step outside. If he were an ordinary 13-year-old, he might have wet himself in fear and collapsed on the spot. Luckily for him, he was not an ordinary 13-year-old. He smirked despite the overwhelming aura coming from the knight and calmly walked past him and punched on the shoulder. This shocked Leonhardt, who stood motionless as the child walked past him, which meant that he had to keep his word. They went out into the relaxing night, and the first thing that Kyle notices is how refreshing the air felt. It had been a long time since he was last outside, and he took a moment to stretch and feel the air on his skin. Even though the garden was not too far from home, he still felt a sense of freedom as he looked at the beautiful night sky. And more than anything, he was excited by the amount of mana particles flowing everywhere. Now that he had the chance, he was going to devour them all. The young lord runs around the garden, trying to pick up as many mana cores as he can while Leonhardt watches. From the knight's perspective, he was running around like a child in a playground, and it reminded him of the fact that Lord Kyle was still a kid at the end of the day. He didn't expect the young lord to be so happy just by going outside, but still, a kid being able to work past him while he was using his killing intent should have been impossible, especially since Lord Kyle hasn't trained in mana or aura, so he shouldn't be able to handle that kind of pressure. Leonhardt remains deep in thought and doesn't notice Kyle glancing at him. It's obvious that he's still rattled from what happened, and he has every reason to be shocked. The reason Kyle could withstand Leonhardt's killing intent was simple. He may physically be a 13-year-old noble boy who has never been in a fight, but mentally, he's a veteran who has survived countless virtual wars for 10 years in a virtual reality game. Fantasy Defense was famous for its realistic depictions through virtual reality, and thanks to his mountain of experience, he had become desensitized to these life-of-death moments, especially since he had already seen some horrible sights while wading through piles of corpses and being drenched in blood. A little scare tactic like killing intent was too easy for him to break after everything he's been through. After a little more mana gathering, he had gotten enough to be able to clear some more mana channels. Coming outside was definitely the right choice. Leonhardt informs the young lord that he will be requesting punishment from the Marquis' order for his actions. Even though he was only following orders, it was still wrong of him to use on someone he was meant to protect and serve. Then he bows his head and apologizes to Kyle for the unnecessary use of a powerful skill on him. Kyle glanced at Leonhardt, then told him to pass his words along to his father that Kyle does not wish for Leonhardt to be punished. The older lord is shocked when he hears that his son Kyle actually said that he didn't want his subordinate to be punished. He asks once again to make sure that Kyle was the one that passed this message to him. Kyle just didn't seem like the type of person to do something like that for anyone. He also mentioned that Kyle managed to face his killing intent skill, which no normal 13-year-old should be able to do. In fact, Leonhardt doubted what he was seeing as well. For Kyle to have resisted the killing intent of an expert knight like him, he must have gained great skill out of nowhere. The older lord then asks what Kyle later did while in the garden. After running around the garden for a while, he relaxed and meditated. Leonhardt watched him in surprise while he meditated in the garden. He asked the younger lord when he learned how to meditate. When Kyle was younger, he briefly learned swordsmanship from his father. At the time, he also learned how to meditate, but he didn't have the talent for it, so he gave up quickly. So he wanted to try his hand at it again. And to do that, he asked Leonhardt to keep everyone away from the area so he doesn't get distracted. After that, he meditated at that spot for a whole 6 hours. The older lord stopped the story in surprise at the thought that Kyle could even meditate for that long. He meditated for a whole 6 hours, not 6 seconds. That kid might have changed after all. The Duke had once tried to teach Kyle the basics of swordsmanship when he was young. He was a descendant of the Celtarian family after all, so he should at least be able to walk the path of swordsmanship. He also hoped that the white-haired child would inherit the skills of the family's sacred techniques. However, that kid couldn't do anything. He kneeled after just a little bit of training and complained that his legs felt like they were going to cramp up. That made the Duke angry at the fact that such a weak person could be part of his family. There has never been a weaker descendant in his family. Kyle had no talent for swordsmanship at all. On top of that, he lacked tenacity and patience, and he couldn't even endure simple training. So to hear that someone like that actually meditated for 6 hours is unbelievable. Could it be that something had hit his head and changed his personality? Leonhardt already thought of that, and he checked to see if there was anything wrong with his food. Fortunately, there was nothing unusual, and Kyle's sudden change was entirely on his own. His personality had completely changed recently, and it's not just his attitude towards hard work that had changed. Even the way he looked at Leonhardt had clearly changed as well. It seems like he has finally started to mature a bit, and that is something that interests the Duke. He decides to let it go without more discussion and tasks Leonhardt to continue taking care of Kyle. Back in his room, Kyle continues to channel his mana until his spiritual vision is enhanced and his mana starts overflowing. Thanks to that, his eyes can now accurately access the state of his own body. With that, he should be able to clear the mana pathways all the way to his heart in one go. He starts in his arm, then he pulls the mana into his shoulder, down to his spine, and then finally, all the way to his heart. He endures the pain as his heart frees up, but after a moment, he opened up his mana pathways and freed up a path to his heart. Now that he has done that, he should be able to use magic, and he's excited to start learning magic in earnest. In this world, to use magic, a mage has to form a circle near their heart. To master higher level magic, then they must increase the number of circles they have, and the more circles they hope to create, the longer it will take. So if a person hoped to become a mage, they would have to start training between the ages of 5 and 8. Then, by the age of 12, they should be able to form at least one circle to be seen as a person with the potential to become a mage. Since Kyle is already 13 years old, it's a bit late for him to start learning magic. Luckily for him, he wasn't a normal NPC who had to follow the simple rules of their world. Since he has the mana adaptation talent, then his case is different from normal. All he needs to do is form a circle, and he should be able to start learning magic. But first, he had to learn how to form a circle in the first place. Maybe he could build it the way he learned from the game. As he pondered on how he would do things, a knock came from his door. It's Leonhardt, and he came to pass on the news that the Duke has lifted the restrictions on Kyle's movement. Now, he's allowed to leave his room and take a walk in the garden under the condition that Leonhardt accompany him at all times. He still can't leave the estate, but being allowed to walk in the garden is already a blessing for someone who spends every day and night trapped in his room. It seems that Leonhardt really did a good job convincing his father, but it also seems like his favorability had increased as well. It had increased by 30 points out of nowhere. Back when he repelled the killing intent, his favorability was at -50. Maybe he was moved by his meditation in the garden, especially since he meditated all through the night and collapsed in the morning. Leonhardt seems like the kind of person who's impressed by sweat and perseverance. Either way, now that his restrictions have been taken off, there's a place he has been wanting to go. The estate's library is a place filled with all the knowledge he would need to form his first magic circle, but the librarian doesn't look happy to see him. In fact, she looks terrified. She rushes over to Leonhardt in a desperate attempt to find out what's going on. Kyle was banned from entering the library a long time ago after he had spent an entire day tearing some genuine, rare books that would cost a fortune to replace. He used to joke that they were just pieces of paper that were useless after you die, even though she struggled to get them after traveling across the empire. After his outbursts in the library, he was banned from ever stepping foot in there, but it seems like his restrictions had been lifted. Kyle himself is embarrassed that he used to do such foolish things, but now he only came to the library to read, not to cause trouble. He specifically wants books related to magic. That confuses the librarian since the Duke's family always emphasized swordsmanship, so there weren't many books on magic. For now, all he wants is a book that teaches how to form magic circles. She brings him an introductory book that seems way too complicated for his liking. There were books made for 7-year-olds, but each one felt like a university thesis. Normally, if this was some sort of game, then there would be a status window that would allow him to automatically learn everything in each book. As if on cue, a status window appears in front of him and informs him that he has unlocked a skill called spiritual vision. It allows him to translate the low-level book that he was struggling to read and then turn it into simpler copies that he can read quickly. On top of the translation feature, he can also use his sharp perception skill to decode books easily and quickly. He asks Alice, the librarian, for more beginner books, and he's excited to gain as much knowledge as he can. Leonhardt wonders if it is really okay to have these many books borrowed out at once. The librarian was really worried that he would damage some because of the sheer number that he borrowed. Even selling her house wouldn't be enough to replace them if they were lost or damaged. She didn't need to worry so much about it, though, since he planned to finish them quickly. Or at least, he would lose interest in them halfway. Normally, Kyle hated books, but now he's eagerly reading as many as he can, all at once. Leonhardt notices that the books he picked out were mainly books on mana management and magic circle formation. He quickly figured out that this must be related to his disease. He tries to give a little bit of advice to the young noble about how learning magic will be difficult since Hermamum blocks the mana and aura flow of his body, but Kyle already knows what he's trying to say before he even starts talking. Leonhardt offers to back away if his advice is unwelcome, but that's the opposite of what Kyle is thinking. It's a valid point after all, so there's no need to get upset about it. Everyone in the house would probably say the same thing and see what he's doing as a waste of time, but he's the black sheep of the family after all, and he already has a reputation as the reckless youngest son. A little bit of weirdness from him wouldn't surprise anyone. Besides, it's not like reading books harms anyone. At the end of the day, he's sure Leonhardt is just worried that he will fail at learning magic and then fall into a deep despair. But that's quite the opposite. Kyle has no intention of dying young. He stands up and walks towards the older man, then places a closed fist on his chest to reassure him. He's planning to do everything he can to make sure that he survives longer than anyone thinks he can. With that, he leaves to find a more comfortable place to lie down and finish his book. Leonhardt is left stunned at Kyle's sudden personality change. The Kyle Seltarian he remembered wasn't this strong-willed in the slightest. One of his earliest memories with the kid was a day in the training field where he kneeled down on the ground, crying for his father. When Leonhardt came to ask what was wrong, he told him that the older lord had said that there was no need for a kid like him. He used to be such a crybaby once, and now it looked like he was growing into someone admirable. The blonde knight picks up a book and heads towards the kid, and that's when Kyle notices that his affection score has gone from -30 back up to 0. He has no idea why that happened so suddenly. There was nothing special that he did that should make it jump up so suddenly. He's almost scared as the older man approaches him, but all he does is place a book on the table before leaving and offers to wait outside his room. Before the older man left, there was the faintest sign of a smile on his face. Kyle wonders if maybe he just liked seeing the younger boy read. But if that's the case, then why didn't his affection level change while they were in the library? Well, he usually likes seeing persistence, so maybe reading multiple books in one go counts as persistence? Regardless of the reason, Kyle simply chalked it up to him being a strange guy. All the while, Leonhardt stood outside his room with a wishful smile on his face. Now that the older knight is gone and he's all alone, it's time for him to start reading. He activates his sharp perception skill again and starts decoding all the books he had borrowed from the library at once. As he expected of the skill, the decoding speed is dozens of times faster than his regular reading speed. Not just that, but he can also decode multiple books at once, so it was like he was reading all of them at the same time. On top of that, any difficult parts of the decoded content were broken down into simpler data. The knowledge from the book also gets stored in his brain as data. The more books he reads, the more knowledge he gains, which then speeds up the decoding process even more, which increases his comprehension. That then speeds up the decoding process even more. Within a matter of minutes, all the books in the area had been decoded. With that done, it's time to put his magic to the test. The first thing he wants to try is forming a circle using the decoded data. Thanks to the decoded knowledge, he already understands the basic principles of circle formation and the minimum conditions to form a first circle. First, he has to guide the mana along a golden trajectory so he will be able to form a circle. He sits down and prepares to start forming the circle, and with a little bit of concentration, the mana begins to move along the trajectory. Immediately, it starts to feel like his chest is burning near his heart, but he has to endure. Otherwise, the mana will flow backward and damage his organs. He struggles with it, and after a long, agonizing process, he manages to form the first circle. Thanks to this, his blocked pathway trait has been weakened. This means that his mana has become more active, and he was one step closer to beating his terminal disease. He can now collect refined mana within the circle, and with that, he should be able to use magic properly. However, he had spent the entire night reading and trying to form that circle, so as soon as he stood up in celebration, he collapsed in exhaustion. His last thoughts as he started to drift off to sleep were if Leonhardt and Ursule were going to nag at him for sleeping on the floor. Later in the morning, Ursule comes into his room to bring him breakfast, and sees him passed out on the floor. She rushes to his side to try and wake him up. She was confused about why he was out cold and what all these books were doing in his room. Despite the huge toll that the process was taking on his body, it's impressive that he had managed to successfully form the first circle in just a single night. From now on, a new life as the mage Kyle Seltarian was beginning. Meanwhile, Leonhardt returned the books to the librarian, who looked like she was on the verge of exploding from stress. A delicious-looking tray of food sits in the kitchen while Ursule puts the finishing touches on the last piece. After lots of hard work, her meal is finally done. She blushes while remembering the compliments Lord Kyle gives her whenever she cooks well for him. The thought of getting more compliments from him makes her smile, and she grabs the plate to go deliver it to him. On her way out of the kitchen, the maids that once harassed her come over to block the exit to the kitchen. They notice the food on the tray and know that it's supposed to be for the younger lord. They stare down at her condescendingly and tell her that she should go and rest instead of delivering the food. This time, they want to deliver the food to him personally since they've noticed that his personality has been a lot better recently. Besides, serving Lord Kyle wasn't her responsibility once before, so she can return her position to its rightful owner now and return to their original arrangement. Erciel declines their proposal. If they have any complaints about her work, or they want to change it, then they can just talk to Lord Kyle themselves. With that, she walks past them while they call out for her to stop, but she ignores their calls and bumps into a blue-haired maid at the door. This one only looks at her with a confused expression, while the other maid continues to yell at her. They exchange a look for a moment before she walks out of the kitchen to serve Lord Kyle. As she leaves, the blonde-haired maid sends a nasty look in her direction, but doesn't say a word. She delivers the breakfast to Kyle, who digs into it enthusiastically while she watches over him with a smile. She tried adapting the recipe to fit what he had taught her, and it seems like it suits his taste. Her cooking just gets better and better with each passing day. Because of him, she's been practicing hard every day, and she even learned some new recipes from the head chef. She really was diligent and hardworking, and he admired her for that. But his thoughts on her were elsewhere. He asks her how she's progressing with her spirit magic. She freezes as he mentions it and doesn't immediately respond, so he asks her to bring her introduction to the spirit magic book that he had given her once before. She has read about halfway through the book so far, and judging by the worn pages, she has also been studying it diligently. Since she's from a noble family, that also means that she has basic education, and her learning speed isn't slow. However, he's not satisfied with her current pace. They don't have the time to take it slow. He needs her to learn more and become stronger. In 2 months, the Seltarian family will hold the heir succession ceremony. On that day, the second son, Adolf, will lead a coup aided by dark spirits, and the Marquis family will fall. Everyone in the villa at the time will be caught up in the chaos, and Erciel as well will be caught in the middle, where she'll lose her life. To avoid that happening, she must become stronger. To give her more time for studying, he decides that she will be put off cooking duties for a while. For now, he will just have one of the other maids take over serving him, so she wouldn't have to worry about it. Erciel immediately refuses his offer and clenches her clothes as tears build in her eyes. She promises to work harder so she can keep studying spirit magic while still cooking for him. That way, she won't be neglecting either of them. While still crying, she begs him not to let anyone else serve him so she can keep being by his side. Her crying face moves Kyle's heart. It seems like she wasn't considering her feelings at all. Her family had collapsed in an instant, and she went from being the daughter of a baronet to a slave, then finally to a maid. She even lost contact with her family and has no idea if they are alive or dead. Because of that, it makes sense that she would be heavily insecure about her life as a maid, especially since she is only just adjusting. So far, she has only been able to live a somewhat stable life thanks to his help. And now he wants to change all of that for seemingly no reason. It makes sense that he would be confused by all this. She must have thought that if she couldn't perform her duties as a maid properly, then she would be locked out of the mansion. That must be what she's thinking since he never explained the situation properly. Now that he has taken the time to consider her feelings, he decides to fully explain the situation to her. First, he reminds her of what he told her when they first met, and he brought her here. He told her that she belonged to him, and he never abandons one of his people. That means he will always protect them. The young maid is taken aback by his words, but he keeps going, explaining his reason for asking her to learn spirit magic as well. She's an excellent maid with incredible cooking skills and a diligent and meticulous work ethic. If she were to keep working hard like this, then she would surely be promoted to head maid. However, there are plenty of other maids in the mansion besides her, which means that there are plenty of people who can replace her at any time. Her face changes to an expression of fear, and she tries to plead with him again, but he cuts her off by placing a hand on her shoulder. Then he asks her what would happen if she were to become a spirit mage. Spirit mages were rare and respected mages, which means that if she becomes one, she's bound to become a great person in the future. Everyone will look up to her, and she will become the greatest spirit mage that ever existed. Her mind begins to daydream about adventures they could have with her as a spirit mage, and Lord Kyle by her side. By then, there would be no one in the world who could replace her, and she would be with him for as long as possible. She still seems insecure about whether she can pull it off at all, but Kyle assures her that she can easily become the greatest spirit mage. With his confidence as her drive, she takes the book from his hand and agrees to become a spirit mage just as he wants. At the same time, her affection for him goes up by 10 points, and she pledges to trust his judgment on her. After that, he officially appointed Erciel as his personal maid, which gave her a fancy bow. From there, she began to handle his personal affairs, and he also moved her out of the shared maid quarters into her own private room. That way, she'll be able to study, and she won't have to worry about clashing with the other maids. She seems more excited by the fact that this room is close to his room than for the added security, though. He hopes that with this, they will be able to work together and grow strong together. After a while, she settles into her new room filled with books for her to read. While looking through her vast bookcase one day, she notices Kyle and Leonhardt walking through the courtyard. Kyle notices her looking at him through the window and sends her a wave and a smile. She giggles and leans against the window while watching him pass by, while her affection increases to 65. Meanwhile, reports of Kyle's change in behavior reach an unexpected individual. It seems that news of Kyle's change has reached a lot of people. Recently, they've noticed that he has been exercising a lot more often and building his strength. On top of that, he doesn't snap at people as often, and he has recently been dedicating a lot of his time to studying magic. It seems like somehow his personality has increased greatly, and he has finally grown up somehow. It seems like it was finally time for Adolf Seltarian to pay a visit to his once foolish younger brother. Ursule waves back at Kyle as he passes by. He turns to Leonhardt and asks him to prepare a wide open space that's far away from the sight of other people. There's something he wants to experiment with in that space. He's hoping to try a magic experiment. His mind goes to a place in the outermost part of the estate where no one is likely to see them. The place is surrounded by a dense forest of trees, which makes it hard to see anything from the outside. That makes it perfect for the experience the young noble plans to practice. He instructs Leonhardt not to let anyone get close to them. Then he stands in the center of the field and prepares himself to unleash a spell. Leonhardt watches him from afar with a bit of doubt in his mind. Lord Kyle has never been able to use magic or practice swordsmanship due to his hermimum disease. Reading a few magic books over a couple of days isn't going to change that fact. However, the current Kyle might have a way to break free of those limitations somehow. The white-haired noble prepares a ball of magic in his palm, then sends it out as a magic missile towards a tree. The spell explodes in a bright light and immediately destroys the tree on impact. Leonhardt and even Kyle himself are surprised by just how powerful the spell was. The tree slowly falls over to the side as the two of them watch while shocked at the output of power he just showed. Kyle immediately turns to Leonhardt and asks if he thinks the sound reached the mansion. Thankfully, the knight managed to use his aura to suppress the explosion. That means that they wouldn't have heard the sound of the falling tree as well. His fast reflexes managed to save both of them from some very uncomfortable questions. While that is definitely nice for both of them, there's a bigger question left to be answered. When and how did Lord Kyle form a magic circle? Kyle responds that he formed it not too long ago after following instructions that the book from the library said. Somehow, with those techniques, he managed to tap into his blocked mana. Since he had successfully cast magic and formed a magic circle, that means that he had now overcome his hermimum disease. To show more proof, he summons a magic orb in his hand and shows it proudly to Leonhardt. At that moment, the promises that the young lord made flashed through his mind. He said that he would do everything he could to cure his illness, and he had no intention of dying young. Somehow, he had actually managed to pull it off. Leonhardt had felt something different about the white-haired delinquent once before, but he had no idea that this was it. He warmly congratulates Kyle on his accomplishment, and his affinity increases by 10 since he has started admiring the kid. That's to be expected from a man of perseverance. He is easily impressed by people who achieve things based on their hard work. However, there were still several questions to be asked, like the fact that he had only formed the first circle, and the power he just showed is definitely more than a simple first circle spell. The power of a first circle spell is usually just about the same strength as a punch from an adult human male, but the blast he sent out had the power of a fourth circle spell, which is way more advanced than any spell a beginner should be able to cast. Despite that though, he's still a first level mage, which makes his ability to cast such power spells even more incredible. Could it be that Lord Kyle is actually some sort of prodigy? No matter how you look at it though, this power is just way too noticeable. Thanks to his mind's eye ability, he was able to read all the first circle magic books in the library. If it weren't for that skill, it would have taken months to successfully form a circle. The skill also decodes that magic is used differently from how he remembers in the game. According to the magic books, he had to draw a complex magic circle to be able to use magic. Then, after going through a bunch of difficult equations and calculations, he then had to activate the circle by circulating the mana. The process is longer and much more old-fashioned than what he remembered from the game. In the game, all he had to do was draw a simple magic symbol with mana, and then it would activate half away. This method was way easier to use and a lot more powerful than the complicated methods he had to learn. On top of that, he had also learned all the magic symbols in the game over the long amount of time he played. Since the methods were way too complex for his liking, he decided to use magic in a more user-friendly way, like he did in the game, but the end result is way more powerful than he thought it would be. If anyone found out about just how strong he was with these techniques, then that would be a problem. It's not time to reveal his full strength yet, and it'd be better if he kept it a secret. He asks Leonhardt to keep what he saw today a secret, even from the head of the family. Leonhardt is confused about why he would want that, causing Kyle to try and convince him by making a cute face. That only makes the knight's affinity drop instead. So instead, he decides to tell Leonhardt the reason he wants to keep the strength of his powers a secret. It's because of the succession ceremony in 2 months. It's a very important tradition in the Marquis Seltarian family that chooses the next successor. The successor is not chosen by age but through a competition. All their traits are judged at once, including their personality, wisdom, public support, and other factors. All these things are used to determine who was the most promising heir to lead the family to greater prosperity. Because of his promising personality, his primary supporters were the family's long-serving retainers. Right now, there are 2 main people fighting for this position. The eldest son, Abel Seltarian, and the second son, Adolf Eltarian. These 2 characters were incredibly important to the story. Abel Seltarian is the son of the legitimate wife of the Marquis of Seltarian, and he was also the most likely candidate for heir. He has a gentle nature and excellent swordsmanship skills, and on top of that, he's been groomed as the heir since childhood, and he grew up with high expectations as a model elite. Then there's the second son, Adolf Seltarian, who was also born from a legitimate wife. He was overshadowed by his elder brother Abel, and that meant he was overlooked for many years. However, at some point, during his growth, Adolf's personality became more composed, and his swordsmanship skills improved rapidly, which caused him to stand out among the crowd. That meant that Adolf's supporters were young and passionate knights. He almost had the vibe of a gang leader, and these 2 overwhelming personalities clashed in a hallway back at the mansion. As soon as they met each other, Adolf sent a deadly glare in his older brother's direction. Abel, on the other hand, doesn't seem like he's bothered at all. He greets his younger brother politely, especially since it's been a long time since they've seen each other. In fact, he was so lost in thought that he didn't even notice the younger man approaching. At least, that's what he says. But for someone who manifested his aura at just 5 years old, it was impossible to believe that he wouldn't be able to sense someone's presence. That was just a story from ages ago. And even if Abel calls it a fluke that isn't worth bragging about, it's still so much better than his brother, who couldn't manifest his aura until he was 15 years old. The older men accompanying Abel joke that the younger brother might just be slow and lacking talent. And of course, some people just tend to start off slow after all. The casual insults are enough to cause Adolf's subordinates to confront the older men in anger, but he orders them to stop. They were in the main house right now, and acting recklessly could negatively affect him. It seems like he trained his followers well, and Abel condescendingly suggests that he might truly be worthy of being a candidate and the heir of the household. Adolf only scoffs at the snobbish attitude of his older brother. As far as he's concerned, Abel won't have any reason to laugh much longer. With that, he orders his subordinates to continue down the hallway, and they walk off while Abel watches them leave with a suspicious glare. Later on, Kyle calls a meeting with Leonhardt and Ursule in his bedroom. It's about the succession ceremony, which is set to be held in 2 months. The ceremony doesn't care about those born by legitimate or illegitimate means. All they are about is their strength, and that means that any direct descendant of the lord of the household is eligible to compete for the position of heir. Well, at least on paper. In reality, there were exceptions to the rule, and the youngest son just happened to be one of them. Due to Kyle's illness, he was excluded from his competitions by default. The third son, Duke, was also not involved in the competition. Not just because he is too young, but also because, in terms of his skills in sword fighting and magic, there is no comparison between him and the rest of their brothers. Therefore, the most likely candidates for the position were his 2 oldest brothers. Neither of them would like any random surprises appearing at this stage of the game, especially since they were so close to the succession ceremony. So imagine what would happen if it became known that Kyle has suddenly developed a strong power at a time like this. He was once seen as a fool who wasn't even worthy of being in their sights. Now he suddenly looks like he's about to rise as a dark horse. There were only 2 possible reactions to this news. They would either try to convince him to ally with them, or they would go after his head. It seems like a drastic train of thought at first, but history has always been full of bloodshed for the position of heir, so it's not the craziest thought. According to the game's setting, Abel is a fundamentally good person, meaning there was a low chance that he would take the more drastic of the 2 options. Adolf, on the other hand, is almost guaranteed to try and behead his younger brother. That guy is already set on killing his whole family from the beginning, so there's no way the older brother won't try to attack him if he ever finds out that he has learned powerful magic. Because of that, the only option he has is to overcome his hermimum and become stronger. He may have a promising future, but as the youngest first circle mage, it was fine to either bring him in as an ally, or to suffer no major even if they didn't. Now that he has a more detailed understanding of the situation, he decides to trust Kyle's judgment and keep his powers a secret for now. But as soon as the succession ceremony is over, he will report this matter to the head of the family. Kyle's secrecy seems to be reducing his affinity with the knight, but there's nothing else he can do in this situation. Right now, Leonhardt is loyal to his father, so he can't expect the knight to suddenly side with him. It's not impossible, though. and this is already a better scenario than before. Even so, he's already sure that he can make the older man follow him, one way or the other. His unchecked desire is so strong that Leonhardt can feel it. The knight turns back to face Kyle and asks if he is really serious about becoming a mage. The Marquisate of Keltarian is known for their swordsmanship, but it would also be beneficial if he became a helpful mage. The thought of the fact that Kyle will soon make positive contributions to the family makes Leonhardt smile, and his affinity grows by a large amount. Kyle is shocked that it grew out of nowhere, and he has no idea how that even happened. Could it be because they all ate together in his room? That's why the knight was complimenting Ursule on her cooking right after they had their talk. So, in hopes of continuing to increase their affinity, Kyle suggests that they eat together in his room from now on. Leonhardt isn't as thrilled with the idea and suggests that they just eat at the knight's quarters instead, but Ursule is secretly happy about the sudden request. Later on, in the night, Kyle sits on the ground in his room, studying the magic symbols he knew from the game before. These symbols allowed him to activate his magic as fast as possible with a huge amount of power as well, but in this world, he's not able to control how powerful his spells are. It's already difficult to handle as it is, but now he'll have to figure out how to handle it before he can use his magic in public. For now though, he decides to ignore all that and just try to seal the symbols up for now. There will be a chance to show off his magic eventually, but to avoid drawing attention, he will have to use basic magic for now. The magic activation in this world is slow and difficult to learn, but it allows more precise control. Then he gets an idea. Since the magic activation method allowed him to control his magic output, and the symbol activation method allowed him to cast more powerful spells in a shorter time, then he should be able to combine the two and get the advantages of both. He tries to combine them, and the system immediately gives him a warning of a high risk of magical explosion from what he's about to do. The notification window suddenly appearing scared him enough that he jumps back in shock, but it seems like the combination is actually possible. The system asks him if he's sure that he wants to go through with it despite the risks. However, high risks usually mean that he'll get high rewards from it, and he's not going to get anywhere without taking any risks. With that in mind, he starts the process of mixing the two activation methods, while the status window continues to warn him of a danger of magical explosion. Then it asks him one more time if he wants to go through with it, and he agrees to it excitedly. Then, the system starts analyzing his body and his experiences to see if he has the ability to combine the two activation methods. Once the analysis is done, the two spells combine, and he's able to create a new form of magic by combining both his spellcasting techniques into one. With that done, he tries to continue playing around with the spell to see how efficient he can make the spell, until his room starts to crackle with electricity and he realizes a little too late that something is wrong. Ursule walks outside with a pile of towels in her hands. She suddenly hears a large explosion coming from Kyle's room and rushes to see what's going on. Inside his room, she finds Kyle sitting on the floor, surrounded by dirt and stones, while there's a giant hole in the wall. His magic practice hadn't gone as he had planned, and he ended up blowing up his room. He should have probably practiced outside instead once he saw the warning message. But next time, he'll set up better conditions for his future experiments. As they're talking, Leonhardt runs into the room to check out the noise and also starts freaking out about the wall. He asks them to at least help him clean the room up first. However, the books are also ruined by the explosion. A while later, we find Ursule in the kitchen, trying to whip up something tasty for our boy Kyle. But judging by the look on her face, things aren't exactly going smoothly. She can't quite figure out what's off. Her food smells bland, and she definitely doesn't want to hear Kyle complain about how tasteless it is again. As she's lost in thought, another maid strolls into the room. This one is Daisy, and she can't resist teasing Ursule about how serious she always looks when she's cooking for Kyle every day. But Ursule doesn't even flinch. She just keeps her head down and says it's her job, so of course she wants to do it with the utmost care. Daisy is a little surprised by how focused Ursule is, and decides to lend a hand. She suggests adding a pinch of nutmeg to the stew, and says it'll boost the flavor and make it much richer. She even tells her to just try it and see if it clears up her doubts. Ursule looks a bit hesitant, but eventually sprinkles some nutmeg into the stew, gives it a quick taste, and is actually amazed at how much better it tastes. With a look of cute curiosity, she asks her senior if she's so good at cooking, why not teach her? Daisy smiles, though it's a bit sinister looking, and agrees right away. She says she'd be happy to help if she can. But first things first, Daisy suggests they take the food to Kyle. After loading up the trolley, they wheel it to his room. As they walk, Daisy asks how Lord Kyle has been lately, mentioning she's heard he's become much more composed. She admits she was really worried when Ursule became his personal maid, fearing he might trouble or mistreat her. Ursule reassures her that Lord Kyle actually treats her very well. She mentions that she's heard he's become quite responsible lately, waking up early for exercise and studying a lot. Ursule is intrigued by how she is asking so many questions, but she eventually confirms that Kyle really does work hard at his studies. The scene then transitions to our boy, where Ursule shares to him how Daisy seemed very interested in him and asked a lot of questions, even about who Kyle had been meeting lately. Our boy then asks her what exactly she told Daisy. Ursule replies that she didn't reveal much because she didn't want to disclose anything about him. She asks if she did well, and our boy gives her a thumbs up, acknowledging that she made the right choice by not revealing anything to her. He also tells her that, moving forward, it's okay to give more moderate answers. It will be hard to keep it a secret that he's overcome his hermamum illness and started learning magic. As Ursule heads out, Kyle reflects on how his second eldest brother has started to make his move. As night falls at the mansion, the Marquise's booming voice rings out in disbelief. The head of the Celtaruyan family is stunned to learn that Kyle has truly overcome his illness. The knight confirms it again, saying it's indeed true. The youngest son is now studying magic on his own, and has apparently already achieved the first circle. Though our boy's powers go way beyond the first circle, Leonhardt decides to keep this information to himself, because such a revelation would be too much for the head of the family to handle. The Marquis remains skeptical, and he is finding this news too hard to believe. The father then recalls how Kyle was in terrible condition the last time he saw him, throwing tantrums for no apparent reason. At that time, he had to deal with it by giving Kyle a good punch to quiet him down momentarily. He then asks how old Kyle is now. The knight reports that his 13th birthday has just passed. That is when the head reveals a critical detail, which is that to overcome hermamum, you either need exceptional talent in magic or swordsmanship, talents that usually manifest around ages 5 or 6. He wonders if there are any cases of someone overcoming hermamum as late as 13. The knight admits he's not sure of any such cases, but claims he has personally witnessed Kyle overcoming hermamum and using first circle magic. On hearing this, the father wonders if it could be a miracle. He then asks Leonhardt if he should meet his young son personally. Leonhardt reminds him that it's his decision to make, but the head of the family somberly says he's not sure if he should meet Kyle, as he might still harbor resentment against his father. But that's when the knight reveals the opposite to the Marquis. He explains that Kyle actually wants to speak with his father, and if there's something the Marquis wishes to say, the knight offers to deliver the message. Hearing this, the father decides he will meet Kyle in person. The scene flashes back to a moment earlier when, before meeting the head of the family, the knight had asked Kyle if he had any message for his father. That's also when our boy, boldly stepping outside the mansion's boundaries, walks into the courtyard. The knight reminds him that he's still under house arrest and can't leave the annex without the Marquis's permission. Kyle, with unwavering confidence, replies that this is exactly why he wants to meet his father face to face. The knight is startled for a moment by the boldness in his expression, and he hesitates to say anything. Kyle pleads with the knight, giving him an irresistibly cute look. Eventually, the knight has no choice but to agree to young master's plan. In the present, when the father hears that his son doesn't resent him, he's left speechless. The knight clears his throat dramatically and repeats that Kyle wants to meet him. By the way, this man is esteemed Remton Celtarian, the head of the prestigious swordsmanship family, Marquis of the Celtarians, protectors of the family from monsters for generations, and one of the 5 sword masters on the continent. He is of course Kyle's father. When our boy notices a photo of the head of the family, his hand starts trembling uncontrollably. He realizes that it's the original Kyle's body reacting, remembering the deep fear and resentment towards his father. He recalls the harsh days the original owner of this body endured, the fear and apprehension still lingering in him. The constant reminder from his father that he was a good-for-nothing son had left him devastated, and those memories now weigh on Kyle's soul. His father never hesitated to remind him of his worthlessness. Letting out a sigh, our boy reflects on how the recent memories of the original Kyle have now become his memories too. Since Lee Hyun-woo and original Kyle's souls have merged through possession, the pressure and pain that the previous owner once felt are now fully transmitted to him as well. But that's precisely why our boy intends to change. He's determined to show everyone that the Kyle of old, the scared, broken boy, is gone. As part of this body now, he promises to prove Kyle's true worth to the world and to himself. When he finally stands face to face with the Marquis, the man starts off the conversation by asking if he has something to say. Kyle responds with a crisp, loud voice saying, "Yes, Marquis." The Marquis remains silent for a moment, noticing how boldly his son addresses him as Marquis instead of father. It makes him wonder why this brat actually wants to meet him. He then points out that Kyle had been given clear instructions not to leave his room without permission. Recently, though, he acknowledges that Kyle was allowed access to the library for studying, so he warns his son that if he dares cause any more trouble, this time it won't end with just confinement. He asks Kyle if he understands what that means. Kyle begins to tremble instinctively at his father's stern voice and can't help but feel the weight of the past. He points out that there's no trust between him and his son, though he admits it's understandable given how much trouble the original owner of his body caused. He then gets curious about his father's strength as one of the 5 sword masters, so he tries to assess his stats using his system. However, the system fails, unable to provide information on such a high-ranking opponent. Realizing he can't rely on the system info, he decides to negotiate instead. He calmly explains to his father that the reason he formally requested an interview through Leonhardt was precisely to avoid leaving his room without permission. The Marquis perks up, impressed by how efficiently his son has countered him. He can't help but remark how Kyle is now speaking like an adult, just as the rumors suggested. Kyle then acknowledges his past behavior and admits he caused a lot of trouble and annoyance with his childish actions. He completely owns up to all the foolishness of the past, and with a respectful bow, he sincerely expresses his regret. He promises to change for the better. The father is utterly baffled by the drastic change in his son's behavior. How could a brat like Kyle even think of apologizing? He's astonished that a child who used to blame others and get irritated every day is now saying something like this. While our boy decides to speak once again, his father anxiously braces himself for what might come next. Kyle then drops a bombshell that he wants to make a deal with him. Curious, the Marquis asks what kind of deal Kyle has in mind. Our boy first of all reminds his father that he must have already received a report from Leonhardt about him overcoming his Hermimum illness. The father confirms he has heard of it but finds it hard to believe such a miraculous thing could actually happen. Kyle insists it's true. To prove his point, he conjures fire in his hand, revealing to his father that he now possesses first circle magic abilities. The father is completely blown away once again. He didn't really believe Leonhardt's words, but seeing Kyle's magic abilities firsthand leaves him at a loss for words. He confirms he can see the mana flowing inside Kyle's body. Our boy also claims that it's true and that he'll only get stronger with time. Mages who overcome Hermimum are known for their exceptional potential. Kyle adds that it took him only a few days to reach the first circle through self-study, and a mage of this level is said to be as valuable as an entire knight order. He acknowledges that the Seltarian family is famous for its swordsmanship, but having top-notch magic among the direct descendants would be a great addition. He suggests that if the family supports his growth as a mage, he'll keep honing his skills and contribute significantly. He hopes to become a great asset and help the Seltarian Marquis stand out with both swordsmanship and magic, elevating their family's status in the country. Kyle wraps up by asking his father for his thoughts on the proposal. He reminds him that this is a deal that benefits both the family and himself, and requests that his father consider investing in him as a capable talent. After putting his father in a tight spot with his proposal, Kyle also reflects on life's give-and-take nature. He knows the best way to gain favor is to show what you can offer in return. The Seltarian family values its honor and benefit above all, and just showing family blood won't persuade his father. The previous Kyle tried to gain attention through trouble, but those methods only backfired. But our boy is way wiser than the previous Kyle, and he understands that aligning mutual interests can bridge even the toughest relationships. Meanwhile, the father is at a loss for words. He's left wondering if this is really the same Kyle he knew, as he seems so different from the child he once was. Kyle once again asked his dad to support him and help nurture his talent. Of course, this sudden change in his son's behavior has officially boggled his father's mind, and he's not even sure how to respond. He keeps wondering if this is really the same child he knew. The way Kyle speaks so efficiently and negotiates so well was something his dad never expected from him. Achieving what you want through negotiation and learning to use power and authority is a crucial skill for aristocratic children. It's hard to believe that the kid who used to throw tantrums is now saying things like this. The child he once thought was a failure and had neglected has shown remarkable growth. Eventually, he decides to recognize Kyle as a valuable asset to the Seltaron family. Not surprisingly, the son is momentarily startled when his father agrees right away. The man then also promises he'll provide all the necessary funds and magic stones for his studies, and tells his son to make sure he shows his worth. Kyle smiles in response and assures his dad that he'll live up to his expectations. A few days later, we see the surprised faces of both Leonhardt and Erciel. Apparently, they're standing in the new magic workshop that Kyle has acquired to nurture his magic. He looks quite pleased and proudly asks for their opinions. He explains how he's reinforced the entire place with barrier magic artifacts, equipped it with tools for making potions and artifacts, and he is also glad that there won't be any holes in the walls now. Leonhardt was the first to react, and he clearly looks fascinated by the fact that Kyle managed to afford all this, given how expensive it must be. That's when our boy realized he had forgotten to mention that this was all funded by his dad. He explains that all he had to do was charm his father a bit, and he gladly provided the funds. Leonhardt is a bit creeped out by this, finding it hard to believe that charms could actually work on someone like Rempton Seltarian. Kyle then opens another sub-room in his workshop and invites Erciel to take a look. Inside, she sees even more equipment neatly laid out on the shelves. But that is not the main highlight here. Kyle explains that it's difficult to use spirit magic freely in the main room, so he made sure to set up a separate space for it. This new area is equipped with soundproofing and dustproofing, so she can practice spirit magic without any worries. Erciel looks anxious as she glances around because she is not sure if she actually deserves this much. Kyle happily tells her that it's for her to use as much as she likes. He reminds her that he doesn't want her to be just a maid doing menial tasks, and he wants her to grow into an irreplaceable spirit mage that will become his trusted aide. Not surprisingly, the girl bows her head, moved by how highly her master regards her. She even starts to cry and promises to work hard, learn diligently, and become someone who will be truly helpful to him. As she makes this promise, her favorability rating rises to 70. Just as they're sharing this heartfelt moment, the stones on the shelves begin to react, and bright energy starts illuminating the area. They look around and see that the spirit magic circle is suddenly activating on its own. Kyle asks her if she's done something, but she denies it. But it doesn't take him long to realize what's happening. The blue energy starts to coalesce and turns into a cute, fluffy creature with wings that quickly rushes toward Erciel and hugs her tightly. Our boy confirms to us that what we just saw was a spirit summoning ritual, and that the cute, fluffy ball is a familiar. Given that it immediately clung to Erciel, it's clear she's the one who summoned the spirit. He's not too surprised, though, considering her talent for spirit magic. He compliments her on her skills, but Erciel points out that she literally didn't really do anything. Kyle in response explains that spirit magic is different from casting spells or reciting incantations. It involves feeling the spirit's energy in nature and connecting with it through the soul. When her emotions were heightened, the spirit stones in his workshop responded and summoned the spirit for her. He then tells her to look at the shelves, where all the spirit stones that were previously there are now gone. Erciel is bewildered to see that it's true and feels a bit uneasy about it. But the boy reassures her that it's fine, as they were meant to be used anyway. As the spirit clings to the girl, Kyle reflects on how he didn't expect her to summon a spirit so quickly. He's quite curious about what kind of spirit this is. When he tries to use his system to examine it, the system reveals that it's a high-ranking spirit and can't be identified with insight. He then directly asks her what kind of spirit it is. Erciel chats with the little furball and responds that the spirit is known as Ashiris, an ancient spirit of light. Kyle is shocked by the revelation, and he finds it hard to believe that this chubby little spirit is actually the legendary ancient spirit of light. Well, it seems like he might have annoyed the spirit by calling it chubby. Apparently, ancient spirits are so rare that even top-level spirit mages might only manage to summon one after pouring all their spirit stones into the process and spending days and nights on it. The fact that Erciel was able to summon this spirit in one shot is absolutely mind-boggling. What is more fascinating that she was able to summon the spirit unconsciously. Meanwhile, the spirit is still fuming about being called chubby and starts pinching our boy relentlessly. Erciel then quickly explains that this isn't the spirit's true form, and if it reverts to its normal form, the entire mansion might collapse. The bird finally stops pinching Kyle. Erciel then reveals that the spirit wants to be friends with her. Kyle quickly realizes that the spirit must be suggesting they form a contract since it was summoned by Erciel. The girl then promptly asks the spirit if it's okay to form the contract, and the furball chirps a positive response. A yellow light illuminates as the circle activates, and Erciel officially asks the spirit of light if it will form a contract with her. After some formalities, it's time to give the spirit a name. Kyle quickly suggests the name Padaki, and Erciel agrees, bestowing the name upon the spirit. The system confirms that the spirit's name is now Padaki, and the registration is completed. The little furball quickly flies over to its master, and Erciel states that she looks forward to working with Padaki starting today. The spirit chirps a positive response once again. As they share a moment of affection, Kyle reflects on how well his talent discovery project is going. A few days pass, and we see our boy catching up with his older brother, Adolf. The big bro starts off the conversation by apologizing, saying he did not give much attention to his little brother lately as his older brother. Kyle remains modest and replies that it's nothing, as he should have sought out his brother first. It's clear they're not just exchanging brotherly affection, as there's a thick tension between them. Erciel serves tea to Adolf and quickly walks away. As she leaves, Adolf watches her with a purposeful gaze and quickly recognizes her as the slave Kyle had bought from the market. He can't help but comment on how beautiful she looks for a maid. Our boy responds that his main intention was simply to get a maid. His brother then asks if he can take Erciel with him. As soon as these foul words fall into Kyle's ears, he is unable to take another sip of his tea and remains silent, inwardly calling his brother trash. However, he keeps his composure and politely asks if there's no other child he would prefer instead. He starts pretending as if he is romantically interested in Erciel as well, because this is the only way he can avoid offending his evil brother. Adolf takes the bait and quickly dismisses the idea, claiming he's not the type to steal a girl from his younger brother. We then hear Adolf's thoughts as well, and the reason he's avoiding taking the maid is clear, which is that he can't afford to make an enemy of his younger brother just yet by snatching away his girl. Besides, he's heard rumors that Kyle is not that troublemaker brat anymore. But seeing him with women at such a young age only confirms to Adolf that Kyle is likely heading down a dark path. For Adolf, this makes it even easier to lead his brother further into the shadows. Adolf then begins teasing him, saying that if he had known his young brother was such an interesting young man, he would have tried to get closer sooner. He points out how much Kyle has improved, to which our boy simply agrees, mentioning that daily life has no major issues now. His Hermamum isn't fully recovered yet, but it's gradually getting better. Looks like the big bro was not expecting to hear this, and he promptly asks if he is actually recovering. Kyle explains that it's a long-term illness, so it's difficult to cure all at once, but it's improving step by step. He then shows his brother some magic, telling him it's a spell he created that's about 1.5 times more powerful than regular magic. He asks Adolf what he thinks about it, while the big bro is quite impressed to see that Kyle can create spells as well. What shocks him is that Kyle is learning magic rapidly, even though he has not fully recovered from his illness. He begins to worry that our boy might become an obstacle to the heir's succession. He also can't help but to notice that Kyle's attitude has suddenly changed, as if he's becoming a different person. His magical skills are growing day by day as well. He wants to be cautious, but at the end, he just thinks of Kyle as a 12-year-old kid, so there is nothing to be so cautious about. He then decides to manipulate his junior brother for his advantage, and, if he becomes useless, Adolf simply plans to discard him as trash. So he directly asks Kyle if he might be interested in joining his faction. The invitation surprises Kyle, leaving him unsure of how to respond. A heavy silence descends as Adolf eagerly waits for his reply. Kyle then smiles purposefully, as if he's figured out his answer. Adolf decides to inform their father about the situation, and Kyle thanks him for handling it. Afterwards, as Big Bro prepares to leave, he opens the door with a creak, and Leonhardt, standing outside, hears the sound and promptly pays respects to Adolf. Adolf then recalls that Leonhardt is another obstacle in his path. This knight isn't an easy opponent, as despite any temptations, he hasn't switched sides. He then throws a jab at Leonhardt, remarking how it's quite a sight that the knight has been reduced to guarding a snot-nosed brat. With that, Adolf walks away with his escort. Afterwards, the knight simply turns around and enters the room, where he finds Kyle still enjoying some refreshing tea. Our boy then happily informs his knight that Brother Adolf asked him to join the subjugation squad. He further explains that his role will involve working with Baron Jerome, a close aide to Adolf's 5th Legion. This mission will likely serve as a test of loyalty to the brothers, and presents an opportunity to earn merit and gain recognition for the family. Leonhardt is surprised by the news and quickly says that if Kyle is joining the subjugation squad, he wants to go as well. However, our boy turns him down, explaining that having a knight there would put Brother Adolf on guard, and he wants to earn his big brother's trust on his own, and can't have someone from their father's side with him. Leonhardt points out that the mission is dangerous, but Kyle explains that Brother Adolf won't easily trust him. He'll want to see how useful Kyle is in real combat and might even deliberately expose him to danger. My guy then flicks his fingers, and fire begins burning in the palm of his hands. He reassures his knight that he's learned a few tricks to protect himself, so he's not too worried. He adds that he won't reveal all his abilities during the mission, and then asks Leonhardt if he's ever heard of ogre perfumes. Before we can get more details on that, the scene transitions to the green countryside, where soldiers have set up camp in the woods. Apparently, we are in the south of Traston territory, known for its monster-infested forest. The Celteron family regularly sends subjugation squads to clear the monsters there, and as expected, Kyle is part of this team. In the camp, a thin, mustached man introduces himself as Baron Jerome, the partner of our boy, and they will be working side by side for this subjugation mission. Our boy smiles back at the man and mentions that it's his first time in real combat, so he is looking forward to working together with someone experienced as Baron. The man reciprocates with the gesture and promises to protect him no matter what. However, while Baron appears supportive on the surface, our boy senses something off. The man has a negative affinity score of 40, which isn't a great sign. It's unclear what our boy might have done to upset him in the past, but he decides to stay cautious. Baron then decided to head out to prepare for the upcoming tasks. As our boy walks away, Baron reflects that Kyle is just a circle mage, new and inexperienced. Baron decides to keep an eye on him, assessing his skills and ensuring his safety. After all, what trouble could a recently bedridden kid possibly cause? After a while, we see these little goblins are being taken down by our boy's magical prowess. The soldiers standing on the sidelines can't help but praise our boy for his impressive skills. As he takes down goblins left and right, his affinity continues to rise. With a snap of his fingers, the other horde of goblins is set ablaze. The knights around him clap and cheer for his performance, and Kyle could not help but bask in the glory. Baron showers him with praise, declaring him incredible, and points out that this subjugation battle has been the easiest they've ever experienced. Right at that moment, Baron's affinity jumps from -40 to +50 almost instantly. This unexpected development fascinates Kyle, because he's never seen anyone so easy to handle. The soldiers, on the other hand, keep their happy dance going, and Baron is confident that Brother Adolf will be pleased to hear about Kyle's performance. This puts a smile on our boy's face since his first plan has already been secured, and it's now time to move on to part 2. As the night falls, everyone gathers back at the camp for a booze-filled celebration of their easy, stress-free victory. Kyle downplays his role, saying there's nothing to congratulate him for, but Baron insists on acknowledging his incredible magical skills. The other soldiers agree, admitting they initially misunderstood their young lord. They point out how he's still so young and had been living in the mansion, leading them to believe he would struggle with both combat and camping. Their expectations are completely upended when not only does Kyle bravely participate in the battle, but he also doesn't complain about the rough camping conditions. In fact, he proves to be quite mature for his age. When asked about it, Our boy explains that since his brother Adolf must have dealt with these challenges during monster subjugations, he felt he should also act brave and mature, just like his big bro Adolf. Everyone is deeply moved by his words, and some even tear up at the thought of Kyle's admiration for brother Adolf. It seems our boy's strategy worked perfectly. The soldiers quickly agree to report back to brother Adolf about the insane performance, and they are quite eager to inform Adolf about how much his young brother likes him. The favorability also rises up to 60 as everyone feels a warm appreciation for him. As midnight approaches and all the soldiers are deep in sleep, Kyle decides to take a quick look around before heading to bed. The patrolling guard requests him not to go too far, and with that, our boy promptly leaves. Kyle is actually pleased that these bunch of stupid heads don't suspect him of anything just because they see him as a kid. He also reflects on how most of the knights have fallen asleep after celebrating their victory all night. There are a few guards still on duty, but they don't seem to be much of a threat. At that moment, he pulls out a bottle of perfume. It turns out to be ogre perfume, which can summon ogres within a 10-kilometer radius. He used to farm experience with these in the game, so he's familiar with its effects. The scene transitions back a bit to when Kyle first mentioned ogre perfume in front of Leonhardt. The knight quickly confirms that he's never heard of it before. In response, Kyle says that if no one knows about this, then he must be the first creator of it, which also confirms the fact that the recipe for ogre perfume isn't known in this world yet. He explains that it's a perfume that summons ogres within its radius, with the quality determining how large the radius is. Leonhardt reminds him that the goal of the subjugation squad is to tackle a goblin den, and ogres are high-level monsters, so the squad will struggle against them. Kyle confirms that this is exactly what he's aiming for. He points out that there are 12 high-level expert knights in the subjugation squad, so while goblins would be manageable, ogres are a different story. Furthermore, the rest of the soldiers in the 5th Legion are just a bunch of rabble, despite being called a knight squad. Their loyalty to Adolf is unquestionable, but their individual skills are lacking. Apparently, this legion is made up entirely of street criminals whom Adolf brainwashed with dark powers. The powerful brainwashing turned them into fanatics, allowing Adolf to not only expand his influence, but also to demonstrate his control over even the most hopeless individuals. They are now loyally controlled, and if Adolf were to give a command during the succession ceremony, a tragedy would likely unfold, with his knights willing to go to any extreme for him. Even street thugs are part of this estate, and the brainwashed high-level knights are particularly troublesome. To mitigate the risk of such loyalty turning against him, our boy plans to reduce the 5th Legion's strength as much as possible before the succession ceremony. Starting with the 12 high-level expert knights, he intends for them to die heroically fighting the ogres. Kyle's role is to survive this deadly battle and return with the achievement of subjugating the ogres, thereby securing his position and demonstrating his own value. As the aroma from the ogre perfume spreads across the countryside, the ogres are drawn to it, and soon after, the camp is under attack. The soldiers are thrown into confusion, unsure of what's happening. One of the high-ranked knights tries to reassure his comrades, telling them not to falter because it's just a mere ogre. However, their confidence is shattered when the same knight is crushed like a tomato under the giant hand of an ogre. The soldiers tremble and recoil in fear, realizing that if a high-level knight can be defeated so easily, they stand no chance against these monsters. That's when Kyle jumps into the scene, urging everyone to pull themselves together. He scolds them for cowering, reminding them that prestigious Celtarian knights don't behave that way. He further stresses that if they retreat, the ogres will invade their territory, so they must stop the ogres here, no matter the cost. At that moment, Baron Jerome arrives on horseback, relieved to see that our boy is alive and safe. He tells Kyle to make his escape while he takes care of the monster, emphasizing that his safety is the top priority for him. But our boy firmly declares that he won't run. He makes it clear that he will stay and fight with everyone until the end, because he can't face brother Adolf if he abandons his followers and runs away alone. He asks the thin mustache if there's anything wrong with his decision. Baron is quite touched by the bravery our boy is showing, and looks back at him with admiration. That's when Kyle casts a spell, giving Baron an extra boost. As the spell takes effect, Baron feels lighter and more invigorated. Kyle explains that since he is still a first circle mage, he will support and control from the back. He tells Baron to take the lead and fight bravely. The man quickly agrees to his young lord's command. With a confident grip on his sword, he dismounts from his horse and reflects on Kyle's bravery and unwavering stance in battle. He acknowledges that our boy is indeed an irreplaceable asset to brother Adolf, and he decides to report to him that his little brother is quite loyal to him. With a determined stance, Baron unleashes a terrifying amount of power, causing the ground to shatter under the force. He challenges the ogre to come at him and charges towards the giant creature. The soldiers watch in awe as their senior marches forward without a shred of hesitation. Inspired by Baron's fearless stance, they realize they can't afford to look pathetic. Motivated by their senior, they resolve to follow him at all costs and fight with everything they've got. Kyle gives a final push, encouraging the soldiers to march forward and face the danger with all their might. The knights, motivated by his words, march toward their deaths without a shred of hesitation. Meanwhile, Kyle grins to see his plan unfolding just as he had planned. Although the soldiers are strong, his perfume has summoned extra powerful ogres, 2 or 3 times more formidable than usual. He continues to rally the 5th Legion, while inwardly, he could not help but to feel happy that this will be their final stand. The soldiers are caught off guard and are mercilessly slaughtered by the enormous 2-headed giant ogres. Despite all of this gruesome mess, Thin Mustache charges at one of the ogres with his sword drawn, his eyes blazing with vengeance. He shouts for the monster to die and swings his sword with all his might. As he continues to battle the ogre, one of the knights looks around and realizes that most of their high-ranking knights have already been killed, with only a few remaining. The soldier begins to shiver with terror, wondering if he can even make it out alive, as the enemy proves to be far too powerful to contend with. Meanwhile, Kyle continues to smile, seeing this as his only chance to thin out his brother's knights. Initially, there were about 12 high-ranking knights, but now only 3 remain, including Thin Mustache Baron. Baron also has been pushed to his limits, and is uncertain whether they can achieve victory. He contemplates using his final option, which is the power of darkness. Before unleashing this terrifying power, he recalls brother Adolf's warning. Adolf had told him that the power of darkness would make him stronger and allow him to sense a power, unlike anything he had felt before. Fully unleashing it would come at a cost. He would be unable to revert to his old self, transforming into a frenzied beast and losing his humanity. Therefore, Adolf advised him not to release this power recklessly. Thin Mustache wrestles with the decision, knowing that using this power could be a last resort in their desperate situation. Despite the danger, he decides to unleash his dark power. He knows that while he might be able to defeat the twin-headed ogre, he won't be able to contain his rage, and losing control is still better than dying like a lamb. However, just as he prepares to unleash his power, a bolt of lightning descends from the sky, striking the beast and stunning it entirely. It turns out that the lightning was from Kyle. He instructs Thin Mustache to penetrate the enemy lines while he provides backup from the shore. Thin Mustache brims with admiration for our boy. He quickly agrees with the plan, while he feels reassured that he finally does not have to resort to using his dark powers. Kyle then casts a spell known as Mind Cleansing, which rapidly heals everyone within its range. Thin Mustache is both shocked and surprised by the effect, as they feel invigorated and their minds are cleared. This rejuvenates their resolve, reminding them that they are the 5th Legion under Adolf's command. Energized and focused, they recommence fighting the twin-headed ogre with renewed determination. One of the elite knights strikes the monster right on its overgrown head, but the ogre sends him flying with a single slap, and with this one down, only 2 elite knights remain. The monster turns around, grabs the remaining knight, and smashes him against a tree with such force that nothing remains but a splatter of blood. This leaves just 1 elite knight alive, Baron Jerome. Kyle just smiles after seeing his plan come to fruition. You see, his primary goal was to eliminate the 12 elite knights empowered by Adolf's dark magic, and with 11 dead, only Baron Jerome remains. Thin Mustache trembles in fear as he sees the remains of his comrades scattered around. Despite his fear, he remains resolute and tells Kyle to cast that spell once more, promising that he will soon end the life of the mutated ogre. Kyle, on the other hand, just flashes his trademark smile, and he finally casts the spell, Ensnare, and these hand-like appendages pop out of nowhere to grab the knight from all sides, rendering him unable to move. The knight is completely bewildered by his inability to move. Kyle calmly tells him to keep his eyes forward because the ogre is right in front of him. That is when the orc begins grinning at the sight of its prey immobilized, raises its hand and crushes Thin Mustache with a brutal swipe, leaving the other soldiers in shock and dismay. They are at a loss now that their senior is dead. The ogre then turns its attention toward the remaining soldiers. But before it can act, a storm of fire hits the monster, burning it alive and leaving the soldiers in absolute awe. The ogre slumps to the ground, defeated and scorched. Kyle descends from the hill and lands directly above the roasted body of the ogre. With precision, he pulls out a crystal from the monster's body, which appears to be part of an elite unit. With his plan officially played out as intended, he decides to wrap up his charade. He announces to everyone that the mutant ogre has been vanquished, and he gives credits to Baron's sacrifice, which gave Kyle the opportunity to strike and defeat the monster. He also praises the 12 valiant knights who fought selflessly. As the sun rises, Kyle concludes his speech, saying they have finally succeeded and lived to see another day. At first, everyone is wide-eyed and unsure how to react, but soon they begin to beam with happiness at their hard-earned victory. They celebrate with their hands raised in the air, reveling in the triumph. As the party starts their journey back to the mansion, our boy reflects on the noteworthy success of the subjugation. The extermination of the mutated 2-headed ogre, along with the original goal of annihilating the goblin tribe, is a significant achievement. However, it came at a heavy cost, and the sacrifices were not small. Once they finally reach the mansion, Brother Adolf is shocked and quickly asks if Baron Jerome is actually dead. Kyle somberly responds that Baron fought the mutated ogre to the death, and without his fierce battle, no one, including Kyle himself, would have survived. Devastated by the news, Adolf pulls back the curtains covering the dead body of his most loyal subordinate. He is indeed shocked to see that Baron Jerome is dead, but what troubles him even more is that it appears Baron had not tapped into the power of darkness. The loss of Baron Jerome and the high-level expert knights is a painful blow to Adolf, and it drives him into a furious rage, though he doesn't voice his anger directly. Instead, he pretends to be concerned and expresses relief that his little brother is still alive. He acknowledges that Kyle's victory over the mutated ogre is commendable and says he will inform their father and ensure he is properly rewarded for his achievements. The junior brother responds with a broad smile and thanks Adolf for his words. As they finally begin to enter the mansion, Kyle smirks to himself, wondering if he has truly succeeded in deceiving his big brother. Night falls, and we find our boy hanging out with his knight and maid, looking pretty pleased with himself. He's narrating how he managed to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He weakened the 5th Legion's strength and gained brother Adolf's favor. Plus, he snagged the core of the mutated ogre, which will be super useful for treating Hernimum. Well, come to think of it, it's more like hitting 3 birds with 1 stone. Anyway, Leonhardt is relieved that he made it back safely, but he notes it was pretty dangerous. Kyle just shrugs it off, saying that 1 mutated ogre was no big deal for him, and he is sure that he could have handled it without breaking a sweat. He simply wanted to pretend to be weaker to show everyone that he is just a harmless kid. Leonhardt then asks if he plans to stick with brother Adolf's camp, and what his plans are for Lord Abel. Kyle just smiles in response and tells him to wait and watch, confident that brother Abel will come looking for him on his own. A few days later, the major members of the Seltarian family gather in the conference room to review the results of the subjugation and decide how to distribute the spoils. During the discussion, the Marquis mentions he wants to talk about Kyle's role in the ogre's defeat and opens the floor for any objections. There's a murmur of surprise and disbelief among the family members, who find it hard to believe that Kyle was even involved in defeating the monster at all. On the other hand, Adolf sits with a smug smile, already plotting to keep Kyle firmly on his side. One of the members in the conference room finally raises their hand, pointing out that Kyle's supposed significant role in the hunting party sounds like a bit of a stretch. This critic is Baron Hemmington, a rather portly figure known for his bluntness. The Marquis asks for clarification, and Baron Hemmington responds that while it's well known how much the Marquis adores his youngest son and often praises him, the reality is that Kyle is just a first-circle magician, essentially an apprentice new to magic. Considering the trouble our boy has caused in the past, Hemmington argues that merely participating in the subjugation and returning safely doesn't warrant credit for the monster's defeat. It's hard to believe that someone could mature so quickly overnight and play such a pivotal role. He also goes on to highlight that Kyle has always been a troublesome child up until now. The other family members seem to nod along, clearly worried about what kind of mischief Kyle might be cooking up now. Kyle, meanwhile, is somewhat fascinated by the fact that these loudmouths have no qualms about speaking ill of him right in his presence. It seems the original Kyle is living up to his reputation as a troublesome kid, which isn't too surprising. At that moment, Kyle himself decides to speak up. He addresses the Baron directly, pointing out that he was present when the mutated ogres were rampaging, and simply surviving and witnessing such an event is an achievement in itself. He urges the Baron to reconsider his opinion, emphasizing that only someone who has faced a monster like that firsthand can truly understand the true terror. He further challenges the fatty by asking if he thinks dealing with such a threat is as easy as it sounds. Of course, Baron Hemmington is visibly startled by our boy's challenging tone. As he stumbles for a response, Lord Abel also speaks up. He points out that even regular ogres are tough to deal with, even for several high-level expert knights. Considering the ogre Kyle faced was a 2-headed one, twice as strong as a regular ogre, the fact that Kyle returned alive is indeed nothing short of a miracle. Our boy feels a bit bewildered to see his oldest brother defending him, which is a rare show of support. On the other hand, Baron Hemmington tries to counter by arguing that Kyle's survival was due to the knights risking their lives to protect him. He emphasizes that all 12 high-level expert knights died, which clearly suggests that Kyle's survival was more a matter of luck and the sacrifices of others, rather than his own prowess. Lord Abel speaks up again, and stresses the fact that the blow that killed the mutated ogre was delivered by Kyle's spell, as confirmed by the surviving knights. He acknowledges that while Kyle may have been a troublemaker during his childhood, he still made significant contributions in this subjugation, and is now focused on studying magic diligently. Abel argues that it would be fair for Baron Hemmington to set aside his prejudice and recognize Kyle's achievements. The fatty tries to argue further, but Adolf cuts him off with a raised voice, asking if he really believes he has the right to bring up Kyle's past misdeeds and criticize a direct descendant of the Seltarians over baseless claims. Adolf then questions if he is trying to overstep his authority. This causes Hemmington to shrink back in fear, quickly denying any such intention. Meanwhile, Kyle, the man of the hour, is utterly bewildered by what's happening. Both of his brothers are actually defending him. Adolf finally calms down, clears his throat, and turns to their father, declaring that his vote is in Kyle's favor. He fully recognizes his little brother's achievements and insists they must be acknowledged. He reminds his father that the 5th Legion is directly under his command, and all of the boys testified that his young brother fought bravely. With both Abel and Adolf in agreement, their father delivers the final verdict. If both brothers agree, there are no objections to acknowledging Kyle's contribution. Marquis declares that from now on, Kyle is officially free to come and go from the main residence, and he may even leave the estate. Our boy lights up with happiness at hearing his father's verdict. However, his father goes on to say that the spoils recovered from the mutated ogre will be distributed based on merit, and that Kyle will not receive any of them. This catches our boy off guard, as he wasn't expecting to be cut out like that. With those final words, his father adjourns the meeting, and everyone is allowed to leave. But Kyle stands there, completely bewildered by the last part of his father's verdict. He has no idea why, despite being acknowledged for his contributions, he isn't getting any spoils. Before his father leaves, Kyle quickly calls out to him, trying to charm him with his innocent expression, and asks if he's really not going to get any spoils after all his hard work. That is when his father leans closer to his son's ear and whispers about the ogre core that Kyle already swiped. As soon as his father's whispered words sink in, Kyle's breath catches in his throat. He quickly responds, saying he doesn't need the spoils anyway, and that just having his house arrest lifted is more than enough for him. Then from behind, Adolf calls out to him. When Kyle turns around, his big brother reminds him that he kept his promise of informing their father about his achievements, adding that he did it all out of love for his little brother. Kyle, however, can see through the flattery, knowing exactly where Adolf's words are coming from. Meanwhile, Abel is also standing off in the distance, quietly reflecting on how much Kyle has changed in just a few days. He is definitely looking forward to meeting his little brother alone. It seems our boy's prediction has come true after all. In the next scene, we see Abel and Kyle catching up. Right off the bat, Abel drops a bombshell of a news, claiming that he doesn't actually have any serious skills, and this is the first time he's ever mentioned it to anyone, not even their father knows. Kyle just goes along with the conversation, but in his head, he's thinking, why is my brother suddenly dropping secret bombs like this? Kyle had been ready to talk with Abel, but he didn't expect the conversation to take such an unexpected turn. Before we dive further, let's rewind a bit. Right after the meeting ended, Abel approached our boy and personally gave props for the hard work he put into this subjugation. He points out that Kyle has now successfully proven himself in real combat, so he confidently gives a title of a proper mage to our boy. Kyle, however, downplays it, modestly saying he's still far from that title. After all, he's only a first circle mage, and he chalks his success up to sheer luck. Once Abel takes control of the conversation, he promptly invites his little brother to dinner, saying he'd love to hear more about his exploits during the subjugation. At the time, our boy agreed with a smile, but now, sitting across from his brother, he knows the real reason for the invitation, which is that his big bro is trying to recruit him to his side. But what our boy can't figure out is why his big bro is suddenly dropping such a personal secret. There doesn't seem to be any ill intent, but he's still struggling to understand what Abel is truly trying to achieve by revealing something so private. Whatever the case, our boy's mind is also on the bigger picture. If he wants to safely navigate the Marquis of Keltarion rebellion event, Abel's strength needs to grow as Adolf's influence crumbles. Only with solid support from the Marquisate of Keltarion will Kyle have a chance to survive this fantasy chess game. So he knows he has to be very careful with his words here. With that in mind, he turns to his big brother and asks why he is revealing such a significant secret that not even their father knows about. Abel responds by asking if his little brother isn't interested in hearing the full story first. Our boy admits that he would love to hear what his senior has to say, but after learning such a big secret, he's unsure how to react and what Abel truly thinks of him. The senior quickly picks up on Kyle's concern and directly asks if he is worried that there might be ulterior motives behind revealing such crucial information. Kyle sheepishly smiles and kind of agrees to what his brother said. He further admits that he simply can't win against his big brother in the games of wits, so he decides to be straightforward. He makes it clear that while he is currently aligned with Adolf, he doesn't truly support him. However, this doesn't mean he plans to join Abel's side either. The scene then transitions to the practice grounds of the mansion, where we find Adolf venting his frustrations on the training dummies, clearly agitated. One of the maids stands nearby, watching him with a mix of concern and apprehension. His frustration apparently becomes evident as he expresses his irritation that his eldest brother visited Kyle's residence. The maid further confirms this, and adds that there were guards stationed outside, so she was unable to overhear their conversation. Adolf states that he already knows why Abel wanted to meet Kyle and what they discussed. He makes it abundantly clear that he was the first to set his sights on our boy, and is not going to lose him to Abel easily. He then instructs the maid to poison Kyle's food if he ever shows any signs of considering joining Abel, emphasizing that this is precisely why she was stationed there. The lady looks anxious and scared by these stern orders, but reluctantly agrees to carry out the task. The scene shifts back to Kyle and Abel's meeting. When the senior asks him why he isn't interested in joining his side, our boy hesitates to respond. Well, we all just saw what Adolf is plotting against our boy if he joins Abel's side, so it's no surprise that he does not want to join. but he does not say anything to Abel regarding this. Instead, he surprises him by saying Abel is a kind person. Well, this unexpected response catches the senior off guard, while our boy keeps saying how kind his eldest brother is. Apparently, Kyle's words are genuine, especially considering his system shows that Abel's affection level toward him is 0. This is actually a positive sign, given that most people have negative scores in affection toward our boy. Abel, on the other hand, admits he's glad to hear such kind words. However, he also feels regretful for not paying attention to his younger brother and only coming around when he needed something. Kyle reassures him in response, saying he shouldn't feel guilty. He acknowledges his own bratty behavior in the past and admits he also dislikes his former self. He is just glad that his senior brother didn't just bury him for being a brat, and he's thankful for that. Abel bursts into hearty laughter when he hears the funny remark from his junior. He jokes that if he had known his little brother was so smart and perceptive, he would have met him sooner. Then Abel gets serious and tells Kyle that whatever Adolf has promised him, Abel can offer the same, and even better. He asks him if there's any chance for reconsideration. Our boy finally speaks up, saying that if he joins Adolf, he's sure Abel wouldn't hold a grudge. But if he joins Abel instead, Adolf would be ruthless and might even kill him. He further explains that Adolf is genuinely merciless and would go to any lengths to eliminate him if he becomes a hindrance. He adds that he just barely got through a trial and, as a first circle mage, isn't strong enough to defend himself. If Adolf decides to target him, our boy doubts he'd stand a chance. Abel remains quiet upon hearing this extreme evaluation. He notes that our boy is the only family member who has ever expressed such a strong opinion about Adolf. When Kyle asks if he agrees with this assessment, Abel simply nods in confirmation. Before diving deeper into the conversation, Abel finally reveals that his seemingly insignificant skill is actually a keen intuition. He explains that since childhood, he's always had a nagging feeling when something bad was about to happen. This intuition has helped him avoid dangerous situations. However, as they approach the succession ceremony, these ominous feelings have intensified, especially concerning Adolf, who is giving off some seriously dangerous vibes. Abel admits, though, that he doesn't have concrete proof to confirm any ill intentions from Adolf, so he can't be entirely sure. This revelation kind of fascinates our boy. He starts wondering if Abel is actually aware of what's happening around him. What's surprising is that this level of insight should be just a low-level foresight, but Abel also seems to sense dark energy, and he never had that ability in the game. It makes him question what's going on. Could it be that since he entered this game world just as Kyle developed new abilities, other NPCs might have also changed? He remembers how Arshiel, who was supposed to be a minor character, has developed an innate talent for spirit magic. Anyway, Abel speaks up again, saying that even though Adolf is his younger brother and second in line for the Marquisate, their father doesn't think he'll cross any dangerous lines, even if he gets a bit extreme. Abel's just trying to stay cautious because of this ominous feeling he has about Adolf. He admits that this much isn't enough to convince others, which is why he's kept it a secret. Our boy points out that if brother Adolf becomes the successor of the Marquis of Seltarian, the whole place will fall into chaos, and none of them will be safe. Abel seems to get the logic behind this, so he asks Kyle if he really has a plan. Our boy finally reveals that he's going to pretend to be on Adolf's side for now, keep an eye on his movements, and act like a loyal follower to make him drop his guard. Then, he'll take his chance. Abel then highlights that this does not look as simple as it sounds. Kyle explains that's exactly why he needs help, and asks his senior brother if he'd be willing to support him. Abel is momentarily surprised but quickly recovers, and chuckles while saying how he can refuse his adorable little brother's request like that. He agrees to support Kyle from the shadows. With that settled, our guy says he has one favor to ask. But before we can hear about that favor, the scene transitions to give us a look at the mansion. A few days have passed since the conversation with his brother. Inside Kyle's room, we see a pile of platinum coins. Leonhardt gasps in shock as he claims that just one of these coins is worth several times his monthly salary. He asks Kyle how he managed to get so much money. Our boy cheekily replies that he stole it from his older brother. The knight is shocked and asks if he stole it from Abel. Kyle responds positively, and the scene flashes back to the past. There, we see Kyle asking his brother for a large sum of money. Abel, without hesitation, asks how much he needs and promises to prepare the money right away, saying it's just a little gift for his younger brother, so he does not need to pay for it. In the present, our boy happily reveals that he had no idea his older brother was so generous. Amid all this, Leonhardt also notices a shining ball in the pile of coins and curiously asks his master about it. Kyle explains that it's a personal communication orb that his brother gave him so they can stay in touch. The knight finds this absurd and points out that these orbs are so expensive he could easily buy a mansion with a garden for the same amount. Kyle acknowledges the high value of these items, but corrects his knight that the orb is a simplified version, as it can only be used for direct communication with him. The knight then looks at Kyle, seeing the happiness on his face, and figures that his talks with Lord Abel must have gone well. Kyle confirms that they did go well and that his older brother is truly a good person. He then offers the money to Leonhardt, saying he can keep it as he'll need it sooner. Leonhardt asks what he plans to use all this money for, since they've finished renovating the workshop and recently bought magic and spirit stones, so they shouldn't need more money for a while. Kyle mentions he plans to make more money with this sum, and that it's just his investment capital. In the next scene, we get a vibrant panel showing Ursiel performing spirit magic. As she chants her spell, Padaki begins to glow like a bright sun in the sky, leaving Ursiel bewildered by this unexpected outcome. She had originally intended for her staff to glow, but instead, Padaki responded to her chant. While Padaki snuggles up on Kyle's head, the girl shouts at her to stop climbing onto his head. But our boy reassures her that it's totally fine, and even jokes that it's like having a headlamp. Leonhardt, ever the simplest guy, just facepalms in frustration and quickly asks what they're doing in the dungeon right now. Well, this is kind of a good question, and I also want to know what exactly they are doing here. But our boy remains vague when asked about their activities, simply stating they're in a dungeon because it's a dungeon. Leonhardt, clearly annoyed, demands a clearer answer. He reminds Kyle that they had left the mansion with the intention of visiting the neighboring territory of Enpalum, so he wants to know why they're now in a dungeon. Kyle continues to be evasive, explaining that there's a dungeon on the way to Enpalum, and since they were passing by, they decided to take a quick look. Once again, Leonhardt is frustrated with his master's vague response. He decides to give up on asking and simply states that they should get out of the dungeon since it's not a place to stay for long. Kyle counters, saying that their exploration of the dungeon is just beginning. Leonhardt stubbornly reminds him that it's dangerous. He points out that as they've progressed deeper into the cave, the number of monsters has steadily decreased. This likely means a boss monster resides further inside, as low and mid-level monsters tend to avoid boss territories. Leonhardt reveals that he's managed to handle things up to now, but he's unsure what challenges they might face if they continue. He insists they should turn back while they still can. That's when Kyle makes it clear that they are not turning back because the boss is exactly what they're after. Leonhardt is shocked by his master's revelation and asks if leaving the house under the pretense of going to Enpalum was all just a cover. Kyle responds that it wasn't entirely incorrect, as they do have business in Enpalum. However, he explains that he happened to know there was a dungeon on the way. If he had mentioned from the start that they were going to explore the dungeon, they wouldn't have been able to leave the house alone. Twice as many guards would have followed them. He is sure that his second brother's spies and his older brother's guards would have accompanied him as well, which is not a good thing at all. It would have been impossible to explore the dungeon with such a crowd, and if a fight had broken out among them, everyone would have been caught in the middle. Additionally, there are issues with Ursiel. Since Ursiel is training in spirit magic, which Kyle wants to keep secret, he has only informed his father and doesn't want his brothers to know just yet. Therefore, bringing Padaki out in front of people would be problematic. He then addresses the elephant in the room, revealing that the biggest issue is sharing the loot if they bring more people. But Leonhardt points out that with just the three of them, it's quite reckless. He acknowledges that he might be an upper-ranked expert knight, but Ursiel has only just begun learning spirit magic. While the knight keeps his protest, Kyle finally speaks up with a fiery tone that leaves the knight stunned and silent. Kyle reminds him that just because he acted weak back in the mansion, it doesn't mean he should take it at face value. The power of his magic, which has overcome her Mamu, is drastically different from regular magic, and Leonhardt himself is a witness to that. With that in mind, Kyle asks him if he still has any hesitation. He emphasizes that they have a solid team, Leonhardt as their tank, Ursiel as the healer, and himself as the DPS. With everything they need in place, our boy sees no reason why they shouldn't explore the dungeon. For one last time, he tells his knight to stop underestimating his master and show some faith and trust. He then challenges Leonhardt by asking if he still has doubts, to whom he would choose to be loyal, his father or Kyle. Before Leonhardt can respond, Kyle makes it clear that he doesn't need a knight who serves two masters. He wants a knight who serves him alone. This puts Leonhardt in quite a dilemma, and he hesitates to answer. Well, our boy understands the hesitation comes from the fact that Leonhardt is only here as per the Marquis's orders to guard his son. No matter how loyally he serves Kyle, his true master is the Marquis. Our boy has realized that simply showing sentiment won't be enough to secure Leonhardt's loyalty, and forcing him would only backfire severely. The fact that Leonhardt hesitates reassures Kyle that the knight at least acknowledges him as a master worth considering. With that settled, they continue their journey deeper into the dungeon. Leonhardt, with renewed conviction, swears to be the impenetrable shield of Versina. As they step confidently into the main boss chamber, they find the massive creature sitting quietly. The room is revealed to be the Minotaur's secret sanctuary, the name of the dungeon itself. Kyle notices the Minotaur is much larger than he expected, especially since, in Fantasy Defense, this dungeon was known as a beginner farming spot. It had no traps, a short path, few mobs, and most importantly, the rewards were incredibly generous compared to its difficulty. This is exactly why he kept the party small, because he isn't about to share such treasure with anyone else. Leonhardt then reveals that the Minotaur is said to be 3 times stronger than an ogre. Kyle agrees, pointing out that while the Minotaur doesn't use magic, it has incredible strength. If Leonhardt tries to block its giant hammer without sword energy, his bones could easily shatter. Kyle instructs him to take the front line, draw the Minotaur's aggro, and block its hammer attacks. He promises to cast a shield spell to boost Leonhardt's defenses. With the added shield and sword energy, Leonhardt should be able to withstand the heavy attacks. However, Kyle warns that there's one attack to be especially cautious of. When the Minotaur becomes enraged and charges like a bull, it initiates a whirlwind attack. Kyle advises Leonhardt to dodge this attack entirely, because even the strongest shield won't hold up against it. He suggests luring the Minotaur to the outskirts while dodging its attacks as much as possible. Once the Minotaur's whirlwind attack stops, the monster will be exhausted and dazed, and that's when Leonhardt should unleash his attack. Leonhardt acknowledges the instructions, and Kyle turns to Ursula. He tells her to cast buffs on him and Leonhardt before the battle starts. Since this is her first real fight, he suggests that if she gets scared, she should hide behind a rock. However, Ursula confidently replies that she's not scared. But the real issue is that she hasn't fully mastered spirit magic. Despite that, she is determined to support Kyle and show the results of her training. Kyle is quite impressed by her resolve and agrees to let her join the battlefield, but warns her not to overdo it. He advises her to always maintain a safe distance and retreat if she feels like the situation is getting too dangerous. He further explains to her that as the party's healer and buffer, her most important role is not protecting him, but ensuring her own safety. He reminds her that as long as she stays safe, they will have plenty of chances to succeed. In essence, she holds both his and Leonhardt's lives in her hands. Ursula is quite moved to realize how our boy is putting so much faith in her, which makes her blush as she promises to carry out her tasks. Leonhardt, on the other hand, stands quietly and could not help but to notice how much Kyle knows. From the location of this hidden dungeon to the importance of a healer and the specific strategies to defeat the Minotaur, these are things one only learns through actual experience. Leonhardt can't resist asking Kyle directly how he seems so knowledgeable about dungeon raids despite this being his first time entering one. Kyle is caught off guard by his knight's question and struggles to come up with a convincing response. He mentally curses himself for acting like he knows too much, forgetting that he's supposed to be a 13-year-old kid. He realizes that, despite any magical genius he might have, it would be unusual for someone his age to have such extensive knowledge about dungeon raids. Eventually, he comes up with an excuse, claiming he learned some basic tips during the goblin hunt when dealing with the ogre. Leonhardt finds this explanation hard to believe, questioning how Kyle could have learned about the Minotaur's traits and attack patterns from knights who were struggling with ogres. Well, it seems like our boy is not getting anywhere with his lame responses. He's unsure why his knight is pressing so many questions and fears that Leonhardt might be close to discovering that he's not the real Kyle. He imagines a nightmare scenario where Leonhardt stands up in front of everyone and announces that this is not Kyle, but an imposter. Chaos erupts, and our boy can practically hear the crowd cheering as they pummel him with everything they've got. Then he pictures himself all tied up in front of his senior brothers, who are convinced that this brat must be possessed by a demon. They've been suspicious from the start, especially since he's changed so much in just a few days. The idea of being burned alive sends shivers down his spine, so he quickly blurts out that he read about it in a book. The knight still looks unsure and is trying to piece it all together, but Kyle tries to convince him that it's true, mentioning that he spent a lot of time in the library and, oh yeah, he might have secretly read some strategy books too. The knight is totally baffled, but then his expression shifts. He starts to admire his master again, saying that it all makes sense now. He points out how Kyle's been hitting the library often lately, studying like a man on a mission. He's impressed that his master didn't just learn magic, but also got the hang of monster strategies. Leonhardt is feeling incredibly proud watching his master grow. He's practically buzzing with excitement to report back to the Marquis, sure that he'll be thrilled with his youngest son's progress. Meanwhile, as they chat, Kyle notices his affinity with Leonhardt rising. Whatever the case, it's a small but significant victory for him. After all, he was just about to get screwed, and barely saved himself from getting killed. Later on, we see Ursula in action. She casts a healing spell, and tiny spirits rush to Kyle, instantly beginning their work. Her magic boosts his health and defense by 30%, enhances both his mana and sword energy, and restores lost health while providing automatic healing over time. Our boy can't help but compliment Ursula on how much her spirit magic has improved. It's clear she's gotten a lot better since she first learned it. With that, the trio is finally ready to take on the Minotaur. While the monster is still sleeping, Leonhardt charges in, but the Minotaur wakes up and swings its massive weapon just as Leonhardt is about to strike. After a brief clash, the knight steps back to a safe distance and notices how much more solid and lighter his body feels, thanks to Kyle's shield and Ursula's buffs. The Minotaur, now fully awake and furious, lets out a massive roar. It demands to know who these intruders are and why they dared to disturb its slumber. With a menacing growl, it threatens to smash everyone into pieces if they're here to steal its treasures. But the Minotaur's loud mouth is quickly shut up by Kyle's crystal attack. but it only tickles the beast, which just makes it even more annoyed. Kyle just stands there with a smug grin, letting the Minotaur know that the real party has just begun. He then unleashes his ice lance, but the Minotaur blocks the attack with its massive weapon and growls in irritation. Leonhardt sees his chance and lands a solid slash near the Minotaur's throat, making blood pour out like a leaky shower. Kyle is totally pumped to see his knight in action and could not help but admire how badass his knight looks. Our boy then cheekily tells the Minotaur that Leonhardt is far more capable than he realizes. The Minotaur grows even more annoyed to hear this and lifts its giant weapon to crush Leonhardt, but Kyle uses Stone Shield just in time to block the attack. The poor knight, on the other hand, trembles under the Minotaur's massive weapon, thinking he was just a hair's breadth away from having his bones crushed. He's thankful Kyle used the shield spell at the perfect moment. Otherwise, his arms would have been shattered beyond repair. What really blows his mind is Kyle's ability to predict every move and cast spells at just the right moment, seamlessly leading the battle. Kyle's battlefield instincts and spellcasting are top-notch, and he's everything under control. Our boy then casts another spell that strangles the Minotaur, making it unable to move. He follows this up with a barrage of light bullets that hit the monster's overgrown body. The Minotaur roars in agony from the sizzling hot shots, while Kyle stands there like a total gigachad. Both Urshiel and Leonhardt are left utterly bewildered by his incredible display of skill. Even the Minotaur can't help but give a nod to Kyle's mad skills. He's seriously impressed that a mere human has pushed him this far. But don't get it twisted. He's still got a grudge against humans and views them as nothing more than ants. He decides it's time to show who's boss and starts preparing his ultimate attack, the whirlwind. The air around him starts to churn as he swings his axe with fury. Kyle quickly warns his party members that shit is about to get real. He tells Leonhardt to keep the Minotaur's attention and lead it to the outskirts of the battlefield. Leonhardt, ever the diligent knight, takes off like a shot, while Kyle makes sure to boost his knight's defenses, readying him for the storm that's about to hit. As Leonhardt gets closer to the Minotaur, he throws his sword at the beast from a safe distance. The Minotaur roars in anger, his rage reaching new heights as he charges after Leonhardt, who runs toward the outskirts, exactly as they planned. It's a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with Kyle and his team playing their parts to perfection. Our boy starts a countdown from 30, and as he does, we flash back to his earlier advice to Leonhardt, which is to avoid the Minotaur's whirlwind attack and not face it head-on. After such a massive ability, the Minotaur would be exhausted and need a moment to catch its breath, and that's when they can strike back. Back in the present, there are only 5 seconds left before the Minotaur exhausts itself. Those 5 seconds feel like an eternity, as the monster almost brings its giant weapon crashing down on Leonhardt. Just as the final second ticks away, Leonhardt narrowly dodges the attack, escaping by a hair's breadth. He's absolutely terrified, amazed at how close he came to being hit by that massive weapon. Though he is also glad that his close call paid off, he's left wondering if it was all just a coincidence, or if Kyle had timed it perfectly from the start. Our boy then quickly uses another spell, summoning ice crystals that show the full extent of his magic's power. After throwing the crystals at the Minotaur, the beast is finally defeated, leaving behind only its giant weapon. After the battle is officially over, Urshiel is hard at work patching up Leonhardt's hand, and once he's healed, he thanks her for her support. Meanwhile, Kyle is over the moon about the treasure left behind, thrilled to claim it all for himself. The treasure pile is packed with valuable loot, starting with a staff that radiates an aggressive aura. This staff not only allows for slightly faster magic use, but can also store up to 3 spells. Stored spells can be used without consuming mana and have a maximum spell circle of the second. Kyle explains that in fantasy defense, acquiring this staff from the Minotaur dungeon is an essential strategy for mages, offering powerful benefits until one becomes a high-circle mage. He's thrilled that this staff means he won't have to worry about his weaponry for a while. Leonhardt, meanwhile, eyes a sword he found among the treasure. At first glance, he can tell that it's clearly a high-quality blade with magical properties. No wonder the Minotaur was so protective of it. As he looks at the treasure, his mind flashes back to the proposition our boy threw toward him, which was about pledging loyalty, whether to the Marquis or to Kyle himself. Leonhardt is feeling guilty that he is being rewarded with such generosity from his young master, even though he can't even get himself to pledge loyalty to him. Urshiel is also feeling a pang of guilt for always receiving things from Kyle. She admits she wants to be of help to him, even if just a little, but she's unsure how she could ever repay him if she accepts such valuable loot. Kyle reassures her not to feel that way, emphasizing how much both she and Leonhardt have contributed to today's battle. But still, Leonhardt agrees with Urshiel, saying that the sword is too precious for him to use. Kyle sighs at their absurdity and tells them that the equipment isn't just a simple reward. He expects them to get stronger with this high-grade gear. He stresses that they need to enhance their combat power urgently, as they're short on time. This equipment is meant to help them significantly boost their abilities for the challenges ahead. He also acknowledges the rules about reporting and distributing high-grade dungeon rewards through proper channels, but he admits he doesn't intend to follow them this time. He wants to keep their newfound strength and the treasures secret from the rest of the family. He tells Ursula and Leonhardt that they're the only ones he can truly trust right now. He urges them to take the artifacts, improve their abilities, and be of help to him. In the face of looming darkness in the Seltarian family, he emphasizes that becoming stronger is crucial for their survival. After this serious conversation, Kyle decides it's time to start their journey to Enfelum. His both friends acknowledge his words with a positive attitude, ready to embark on their journey and face the challenges ahead. A few days later, at the Enfelum mansion in the Breadbasket region, chaos erupts when Count Frantel Neuron, the Lord of Enfelum, discovers that the Seltarian Marquise family has arrived unannounced. In a state of shock, Frantel is shouting and rushing down the stairs, frantic to find out whether it's the first or second son who has shown up. His assistant, a bespectacled man, explains that he's not sure, but they carry the Seltarian crest, which only direct descendants of the family can possess. Frantel is totally freaking out, wondering if the Seltarians are considering dragging his domain into their family succession drama. His assistant is also worrying about the same thing, and further points out that it's an unwritten rule to avoid involving other families in succession disputes, but it seems they're caught up in it now. When they finally reach the guest room, Count Frantel Neuron pauses for a moment to regain his formal demeanor. He opens the door with a broad smile, ready to warmly welcome his esteemed guests from the Seltarian family. But his greeting gets caught in his throat when he sees Kyle sitting comfortably in the guest room, sipping tea and enjoying some delicacies. When Kyle sees the Lord of the mansion, he promptly greets the Lord and apologizes for the lack of advance notice. Frantel, on the other hand, exclaims in shock, asking who the hell even this boy is. But a real shocker comes to Frantel when he realizes that Kyle is the same good-for-nothing fourth son of the Seltarian family. He is so shocked that he even blurts this line out loud, but he quickly tries to cover his reaction with his hand, as Leonhardt, right beside Kyle, shoots him a glare that clearly says he's not impressed with the Lord's lack of decorum in front of his master. Our boy tries to diffuse the tension by saying it's all good and tells the Lord to chill out. He admits he was a troublemaker until recently, but says he's had a change of heart ever since he recovered himself from Hermimum. He's been reflecting on his past and wants to do better. Frantel is surprised by this news and asks if he really has overcome his illness. Our boy confirms, saying he's now forming a group to practice magic and hopes it will benefit the family. Frantel is struggling to process this because he remembers the youngest as a hopeless troublemaker, and he was the kind of kid even the Seltarian family had given up on. But seeing him now, he realizes he's different from the rumors. His eyes show no sign of confusion. He is also polite, and his posture is impeccable. Not to mention, our boy even has the admirable intention of helping the family, which leads Frantel to believe that the bad rumors he had heard about him must have been false. He beams with happiness as he realizes that Kyle is actually a good guy, contrary to what the rumors say. He then points out how proud our boy's father must be with his youngest son. And the reason for his father's happiness is that in generations of swordsmen, our boy is the only one who's managed to produce magic, making the future of the Seltarian Marquise family look incredibly bright. With the pleasantries aside, Frantel gets back to business. He's certain that Kyle didn't come all the way to Enfelum just for a casual visit, so he asks what brings him to town. Kyle smirks at first, apologizes for the unannounced visit, and explains that the Marquise family is in a sensitive situation regarding a succession issue. He didn't want to draw attention to his movements, so he did not try to announce his arrival. The real reason for his visit is that he wants to purchase grain from Enfelum, which is the largest granary in the north. This surprises Frantel, who points out that they're already trading grain regularly with the Seltarian family, so he wonders if Kyle is looking to make an additional purchase. Our boy confirms this, explaining that the grain is for his personal use and separate from their regular arrangement. He wants it for magical research and can't go into details right now. He also mentions that this won't be a one-time deal, because he plans to continue buying regularly in the future. He's heard that Enfelum has had good harvests recently, resulting in a surplus of grain that's hard to manage. So, he wants to buy up that surplus. Kyle then snaps his fingers, and his knight steps forward, opening a box with a handful of platinum coins. Even though the number of coins is small, Frantel and his assistant are blown away. Their jaws drop as they try to wrap their heads around how this young man has such a fortune. Frantel quickly gathers himself and says that selling the old grain shouldn't be a problem, as they do have excess stock. He acknowledges that magical research is confidential, so he won't pry into his work. Kyle smiles back, glad to be working with Frantel. However, the Lord is curious and asks how a young person like our boy came by such a substantial amount of money. Transactions with unclear funding sources could lead to trouble, especially with such a young buyer. Our boy reassures him, saying that the money is a gift from his brother. When Frantel asks if he means Abel, Kyle confirms he does, saying Abel is the only person he would call his oldest brother. Of course, this only makes Frantel even happier and more inclined to trust Kyle. The fact that Abel readily gave his young brother such a substantial amount of money shows they have a close relationship. He figures that having Kyle and Abel on his side is a better deal than having a relationship with their third brother Adolf, who seems to have sinister intentions. With that in mind, he says that if Abel is vouching for Kyle, he's willing to trust him too. Once our boy secures Frantel's trust, he starts the negotiations. He offers 4 silver coins per sack instead of the 7 silver coins Frantel initially demanded. Frantel and his assistant look at our boy with their clueless faces. But Kyle continues with his negotiation. He argues that 7 silver coins for old wheat is a bit much, especially since the extra old wheat is taking up valuable storage space and incurring storage fees daily. He suggests that selling it for 4 silver coins is the best option for both parties. After a lot of back and forth, Kyle finally settles on 5 silver coins per sack. Once the negotiations are done and they get to the guest room for some rest, Kyle is over the moon. Leonhardt is also impressed by his negotiation skills and curiously asks if he learned them from books. Kyle is caught off guard by this question and sheepishly says that the library has every book he could imagine. However, the truth is, he's picked up these negotiation skills from haggling in online marketplaces. The knight then asks how he plans to make money by purchasing grain. Kyle explains that he intends to buy grain when it's cheap and sell it when demand rises to make a profit. The knight responds that the current grain supply is stable and their Dresden territory has secured reserves until next year. He further points out that it might be difficult to make a profit by putting old grain on the market. Kyle simply explains that they're preparing in advance because they don't know what might happen in the future. You see, our boy knows exactly that a great famine is coming soon. After the Saltarian Marquis family's succession ceremony, unprecedented weather anomalies will lead to a severe famine, causing grain prices to skyrocket. At that point, it won't matter whether the grain is new or old. People won't be able to find food even if they have money. Kyle keeps this to himself, figuring he can't explain it to someone like the knight. However, it seems he doesn't need to explain it anyway. The knight acknowledges that everything Kyle has done so far has had a valid reason, so he trusts that this will be the same. As the knight says this, the favorability level rises to 50, which boggles his mind since it was in the negative when they first met. Later that night, Ursiel enters and explains that Count Frantel Neuron has something to discuss before dinner and asks if Kyle could spare a moment. When Kyle arrives at Count Nyron's room and knocks, he enters and says he's heard the Count wanted to see him. The Count reassures him that it's nothing serious, since he simply wanted to introduce Kyle to someone. Our boy curiously asks to whom he's being introduced to. That's when a young girl stands up and introduces herself as Frantel Neuron's daughter. As soon as our boy hears her pleasant voice and sees her, he's visibly shocked. It turns out she's Iris Nyron, and Kyle clearly wasn't expecting to see her. To understand why our boy is so shocked to see her, let's break it down. You see, Iris Nyron is not just any character. She's a total standout with her cute looks and top-tier magic talent. She's got a massive fan base in fantasy defense, especially in the early game when everyone's still leveling up. But with all the positives, there is a negative side as well, which is that she's super arrogant. Sure, she's beautiful, but she's also a bit of a tyrant, loving to step all over others and hating on anyone weak. She enjoys the luxury of being talented, but her personality was equally messy as well. Trying to get on her good side usually ends up with you broke, thanks to her gold-digging ways. As the game progresses, her shine starts to fade. With the rise of S and SSS class magicians, she finds herself abandoned by her fans. Currently, Kyle is stuck wondering if he should even recruit her to his side, especially since he's not keen on going bankrupt just to keep her happy. He pushes those thoughts aside for now and starts wondering why Count Neuron is introducing his daughter to him at this moment. The man, on the other hand, happily continues, mentioning that his daughter just turned 11 this year, so there's not much of an age gap since Kyle is 13. He's hoping they could become good friends. Then the Count adds that she's even studying magic these days. He insists he's not just saying this because he's her dad, she really does have great talent. Since Kyle is also learning magic, the Count figures they could learn from each other and have a blast together. My guy is a bit at a loss for words, especially since judging by the look on her face, it's clear she's not exactly eager to make friends, even though her dad is pushing for it. Eventually our boy greets her, introducing himself as Kyle Seltharion, the 4th son of the Marquis of Seltharion. He's trying to be smooth, looking forward to their time together. Just as he says this, he activates his appraisal ability and quickly reads her stats. Not surprisingly, her characteristics line up perfectly with what we have heard before, and she has a whopping negative 48 favorability towards him as well. But what really catches him off guard is her talent, Mana's Companion. You see, Kyle himself has Mana Stagnation, a broken talent he's never seen in anyone else. In the original game, Mana's Companion was the top talent in the mage category, available only to the top 0.01% of SSS class mages. So he's baffled as to how Iris, an A-class mage in fantasy defense, has this talent. It's pretty clear she's gained some extra abilities, just like Abel and Ursiel. That means new possibilities have opened up for her, and Kyle can't help but wonder what that means for their dynamic. He reflects on how, despite her off-putting personality traits making her a target for avoidance during the game, if he could get his hands on an SSS-level talent, everything would change. He simply can't afford to miss this opportunity, no matter the cost. On the other hand, Iris, with her signature sass, fires back. She points out that he's the fourth and last in the Celterian family line, teasing him about how she's never heard of him before, even though she knows all about the achievements of Abel and Adolf Celterian. With a smirk, she claims she's already in the second circle while he's still stuck in the first. She wonders aloud what they should do about the power gap, acting like they're on completely different levels. Meanwhile, Kyle is doing his best to maintain a straight face, but inside, he's cursing her out. He can't help but wonder why she's like this, and wonders did she really have to be such a twisted character ever since she was a kid. Kyle calmly replies that, yes, he's a first circle mage, and it's only been 3 months since he started learning magic. When Iris hears this, her eyes widen as she realizes he's reached the first circle in such a short time. She can't help but think that he is progressing way faster than him. Twice as fast, in fact. He then explains that he only started learning magic after turning 13. Iris reminds him, with a hint of sass, that he's late to the party, saying it's common sense to start learning magic at around 10 years old, at the very least. Kyle responds positively, agreeing that he did start a bit late. But in his head, he's comparing her to a feisty kitten. Her natural aggression in her tone makes the insults almost bearable. He decides to share a bit more, telling her he suffered from a hermetic illness and has just recently recovered from it. Iris is genuinely surprised to hear that Kyle has overcome his serious illness, and she blushes a bit, saying that's actually impressive. But she quickly snaps out of it, defensively insisting that she's not admiring him for that or anything. Her father then reminds her that overcoming such an illness typically requires extraordinary magical power, or the potential to become a great knight. The fact that Kyle managed to conquer it at just 13 years old is pretty remarkable. He explains that Kyle is only going to get stronger as he continues to grow. He suggests that Iris should study with him, hoping they can learn from each other and positively influence one another. Iris, however, stays adorably stubborn. She reminds her father that our boy is still in the first circle, so she's not quite sure what she could learn from someone in a lower circle than her. Meanwhile, Kyle stands there with a smile plastered across his face, thinking about how her characteristic contempt for the weak is kicking in. She's underestimating him, assuming he's actually weaker. He thinks to himself how her personality is a bit problematic, and he figures he might need to help her fix that bad habit. Finally, he decides that Iris Neyron is the third talented person he wants by his side. To impress her a bit, he tells her not to judge a book by its cover. He steps closer and confidently says that he'll prove he's not weaker than her, and once he does, she won't be able to ignore him anymore. Iris starts blushing when she sees Kyle so confident, and she can't help but be a bit wavered by his demeanor. She then quickly asks how he plans to prove his strength. In response, Kyle invites her to a duel, saying that if he loses, he'll admit she's stronger. But before he can finish talking, she cuts him off, insisting she'll take the challenge, and adds with a smirk that if she wins, he'll have to get on his knees and lick her feet. Well, not gonna lie, this doesn't sound half bad either. Her father, however, looks utterly shocked, trying to figure out where she picked up such a bizarre kink. Iris sheepishly admits she read it in a romance novel. Her father starts shouting at her, demanding to know what kind of twisted romance novels she's reading. He quickly prohibits any more books and bans her from reading them again. As Iris's eyes start to well up from her dad's yelling, Kyle steps in and assures them that it doesn't matter what the challenge is. If he loses, he'll accept it, even if it means licking feet or toes. This only freaks her father out even more, while Kyle makes it clear that if he wins, she will have to accept him as her teacher. He also tells her to promise that she will never look down on anyone weaker or of lower status. Iris pauses for a moment but eventually agrees, cockily claiming she won't lose to someone in the first circle who just started learning magic. With that, she stomps out of the place, full of confidence, while her father claims that her personality is quite problematic. He explains that it's because she was raised by a family that's always been proud of her since she was little. He worries that if she continues growing up this way, she'll become increasingly hated by the world, making it harder for her to get along with others. Right now, she doesn't have any friends her age, and it's true that her reputation in social circles isn't great. Our boy is amazed to see that despite being a doting father, he's fully aware that his daughter is a problematic child. It makes him respect the Count a little more, realizing he's not just overlooking her flaws. The Count then highlights how Kyle had a stormy childhood himself, wondering if that's why he can understand Iris's mindset and actions. He believes it would be beneficial for her to experience defeat once in a while, so he gives our boy full permission to not hold back and teach her the harsh lessons she deserves. When Kyle hears this, he can't help but smile. Now he has the parents' permission to teach her a lesson, and he's looking forward to it. Meanwhile, Iris is still stomping down the halls, muttering to herself about how he can't teach her anything when he's only at the first circle. She's feeling pretty annoyed. But then her mind flashes back to that recent heart-pounding moment they shared, and she can't deny he's actually a handsome guy. Still, her arrogance kicks in, and she stubbornly tells herself he's just a first circle mage, determined to make him lick her feet no matter what. Oddly enough, despite her attitude, her favorability towards Kyle starts to rise. I guess that's just how tsundere characters work. A while later, our boy returns to his room, and Leonhardt points out that Count Neyron's introduction of his daughter likely has another intention behind it. His master asks him what he means by that, and the knight reminds him that even though she's only 11, it's an age suitable for discussing marriage proposals. Plus, the age difference with our boy isn't that big. This sends a chill running down Kyle's spine, and he yells at Leonhardt for even thinking about him getting married to an 11-year-old. Leonhardt calmly reminds him that nobles usually marry earlier than commoners, so it's not uncommon to get engaged in their early teens. My guy feels like he's about to puke as he finally realizes why Count Neyron was so eager to introduce his daughter to him. Leonhardt even tells him not to go too hard in tomorrow's duel, suggesting that they never know what might happen between the two of them in the future. He adds that while Iris may be a bit arrogant, she's still just a young lady. Kyle, with a devilish grin, declares that if Iris's father is trying to set him up for marriage, then he needs to crush her even more thoroughly. He makes it abundantly clear that with the kind of attitude she has, there's no way he's going to marry her. Absolutely not. He refuses. Period. Instead, he decides he'll use all his strength to fix her twisted personality. Suddenly, Erciel perks up at the mention of marriage and proposals. Judging by the look on her face, it's obvious she doesn't want to see Kyle marrying Iris. The next day finally arrives, and the rules for the duel are laid out. It's a one-round match, using magic to subdue the opponent without causing any serious harm. Leonhardt adds that if things get dangerous, he won't hesitate to intervene. He then asks both of them if they agree to the rules. Kyle then gets sassy and pointedly reminds Iris that since his knight will be the referee, does she have any objections? The girl keeps her usual nonchalant attitude, simply replies that she has no problem at all. Iris explains that Sir Leonhardt is a famous high-level expert knight and well-known in the Enfilum, so she knows he won't give a biased judgment. With that, Leonhardt finally decides to begin the duel. Iris strikes her pose and quickly unleashes a fiery attack toward him. Kyle just smiles in response, impressed by how fast her incantations are. It's hard to believe she's just 11 with such skills. But he knows she's still far behind him, and he quickly counters with his own wind magic. Their powers collide, and the wind effortlessly blocks the fire arrow. Iris grits her teeth in frustration but quickly swings her magic staff again, thinking to herself that she hasn't even begun to show her full strength and won't lose to a first circle mage like this. She throws another fire arrow, this one even more intense, but Kyle saves himself with just a flick of his wand. He can't help but appreciate her fiery personality. She clearly doesn't know when to give up. Her magical power is quite impressive for her age, but he's determined to teach her a lesson. Kyle raises his hand and throws a lightning attack known as Magic Missile, a spell that combines both lightning and his wind powers. Count Neyron watches in shock, realizing that his potential son-in-law can perform double casting, which is a refined technique that's almost unheard of for a first circle magician. Iris sees the lightning attack heading straight for her and quickly raises her shield to block it. But her shield is dispersed almost instantly, and before she knows it, Kyle is standing right in front of her, wand in hand. Leonhardt declares our boy the victor, and as my guy walks away with a satisfied smile on his face, he can't help but feel a sense of triumph. But this arrogant girl, on the other hand, is struggling to accept that she just lost to a first circle magician. To save her face, she claims that it was just pure luck that he won because she was just in a bad condition for a moment. So she stubbornly demands a rematch to prove her point. Kyle quickly agrees to the rematch, but he makes it clear that the results won't be any different, no matter what. After a while, they face off again, and this time Iris loses once more, falling to her knees in exhaustion. It's now the 5th round she's lost, and honestly, it feels pretty brutal for someone as arrogant as her. He gently informs her that no matter how many times she tries, the results stay the same. He tells her to just end it here since she's probably out of magical power by now. As reality sinks in her mind, Iris starts to feel the heat of her defeat and begins to cry like a child. Count Neyron gets anxious and worried for her. It's not surprising, really. Despite her arrogance, she's still just a child after all. Even Kyle starts to feel a pang of guilt, thinking about how he's made a girl cry. He didn't want it to come to this, but he knows it's a necessary lesson for her. That night at Count Neyron's mansion, Kyle finds himself staring at the fancy clothes the Count provided for the banquet. Looks like he's not really feeling the whole dressing up vibe. Leonhardt, his knight, chimes in, reminding him that even though it's a small family gathering, it's still a formal occasion, and it's best to dress appropriately. But Kyle is not sure why they even invited him to this banquet after he literally made their daughter cry. Leonhardt replies that Count Neyron said it was fine to teach her some harsh lessons. Besides, he probably expected something like this would happen. Leonhardt further points out that since our boy fairly and squarely defeated Lady Iris, Count Neyron seems even more determined to make him his son-in-law. Kyle lets out a sigh, saying Iris might hate him even more now. But his knight insists that's not the case. Judging by her expression, it's likely that Lady Iris actually likes him. Our boy finds this odd and asks if that's really true. Leonhardt just tells him to focus on getting ready for the banquet, while Erciel quickly starts helping him dress up. As Leonhardt watches them in the background, he can't help but lament how Lord Kyle seems to know everything about the world, but is surprisingly clueless when it comes to romance. Once Erciel finishes adjusting his hair, she steps back and tells him he's ready. When we take a full look, my guy absolutely looks like a lady killer. Both the knight and the maid perk up, impressed by how handsome he looks. With that settled, Kyle decides it's time to head out since they're all ready. After getting ready for the event, Kyle finally arrives at the main mansion, where he's warmly welcomed by other guests of his age. A guy with brown hair introduces himself as Myers, while the one with purple hair says he's the second son of the Neyron family. Looks like Mr. Purple Hair is going to be Kyle's future brother-in-law after all. Meanwhile, Count Neyron is frantically scanning the area, clearly on the lookout for his daughter. He is not sure why she's running late. He even tells one of the servants to go check on Iris. Kyle overhears this and starts to wonder if she might be upset because of him and is avoiding the event because he made her cry. Eventually, one of the maids escorts Lady Iris into the hall, and she immediately calls out to her father that she's arrived. Despite her young age, she has a surprisingly mature vibe and looks quite elegant rather than just cute. But she quickly gets flustered, like any young lady would, when she spots Kyle, who is also looking every bit the lady killer. She approaches him, and Kyle immediately starts thinking about how he expected her to cry and sulk. But contrary to what he thought, here she is, which is quite surprising given her nature. Meanwhile, Iris's head is swirling with her own thoughts. She didn't expect him to look this handsome. I mean, she knows he's good looking, but the riz and aura he has is just otherworldly, especially in the clothes he's wearing. Finally, the Count Neyron tells everyone to take their seats and start dinner. Count also makes sure that Kyle sits right next to his future wife. However, Kyle doesn't seem too thrilled about this because he's worried she might start crying or get angry that he's sitting next to her. He quickly activates his mind's eye and notices that her personality characteristics haven't changed much. Despite this, it looks like her favorability toward him has increased by 30 points, which has gone from 40 to 10. This shocks Kyle because, after everything that happened and how she faced such a humiliating defeat, he expected her favorability to drop even further, not rise. But then he wonders if this is due to the appearance worship characteristic she has. There's a chance she sees him as nothing more than a decorative item. Anyway, Kyle enjoys a good dinner. The atmosphere during mealtime is warmer than expected, and Iris is quiet, behaving quite normally in front of her family without acting arrogant. While picking up the salt on the table, they both also accidentally touched each other's hands while Kyle was trying to help her by serving her some salt, and that unexpected touch totally flusters the lady. After that, the girl turns her head away in embarrassment to avoid any eye contact. While Kyle is probably thinking about whether she wants the salt or not, he decides to place it back on the table near her, and she promptly thanks him for his gesture. Kyle isn't sure what's going on or why she's acting so strangely. Even though her favorability has gone up, her attitude toward him has also gotten weirder. I guess Kyle is actually pretty oblivious to romance after all. I mean, who could blame him? He used to be a coomer who did nothing in his past life except play games. The next day arrives, and the first thing we see is a clueless look on Kyle's face. Apparently, Lady Iris is sitting right in front of him, and he wasn't expecting her to come personally just to meet him. After a graceful sip of tea, she reminds him that she is here to keep her promise. Now that she has lost, he will become her teacher, so she requests him to explain why his magic is so strong. She explains that his method is a bit different from the usual, and she has never seen anything like it in any magic book. She is desperate to know who taught him. She bombards him with a ton of questions, like whether he developed those powers by chance, and how he can perform double casting so easily. She is so excited to learn everything that she literally stands up from her seat in the heat of the moment, and politely yet enthusiastically tells him to share everything he knows. Kyle feels overwhelmed by all her questions, and tells her to give him a minute to process everything first. He starts off by reminding her that if she actually wants to become his disciple and learn magic, she needs to work on her attitude as well. At first, Iris doesn't quite get what he's trying to say, so Kyle tells her directly that she has to be polite to others and not be unreasonable. She will need to think 3 times before getting angry with anyone. Well, it seems like this is just too much to ask of her. She tries to protest, asking why she should have to follow these rules when even her father doesn't force her to do so. But Kyle lets her know that if she can't change her attitude, he can't teach her magic either. The lady definitely tries to argue back because she thinks he's being too demanding, but Kyle reminds her that he's the only one who can use magic with the special method he has developed. He reveals to her that he has created mixed drive magic, which has never been published anywhere else, so she can't learn it from anyone but him. He even gives her a little demonstration, sure that since she is also learning magic, she understands the significance of his skills. Of course, the girl quickly acknowledges this, saying it's true, but she still doesn't feel comfortable. As much as she hates to admit it, she reluctantly and annoyingly accepts his conditions in the end. Kyle flashes a smile, saying he knows all too well the innocent face she's trying to put on and that she can't fool him so easily. To help her keep her part of the deal, he reveals that he has made some preparations in advance. The girl is shocked again and asks what he's talking about, but she soon gets her answer when she sees a contract paper. He clears up any lingering doubts by reminding her that if she wants to become his disciple, all she has to do is accept the conditions and sign the contract. As she knows, Breaking a signed magic contract triggers an absolute penalty imposed by the ancient gods, so he asks her to take it seriously. Plus, no magic can cancel a magic contract. She exclaims and asks why he's going to such lengths to make her sign, wondering if it's because he doesn't trust her. To this, Kyle doesn't shy away from admitting that yes, he doesn't entirely trust her. You see, Kyle is convinced that if her attitude problem could have been fixed with just words, it wouldn't still be an issue after 11 years. It's a tough trait to change, and he wouldn't have gone through all this trouble if it were an easy fix. He further tells her that this magic contract was originally given to him after the duel. Yesterday, her father came to Kyle, requesting him to teach his daughter well. After seeing Kyle's skill firsthand, he was certain that only our boy could get through to her. The doting father, almost in tears, even said that if Iris refused to listen to him, Kyle had permission to use this magic contract on her, one of the only 2 genuine contracts in their family. Now, in the present, Iris feels embarrassed and confused, realizing her father is the one who roped her into this. She's convinced he'd never say anything like that, so she tells Kyle he'd better not be lying. Determined to get answers, she starts to rush back to her father to ask him personally what's going on. Kyle just sits as she begins to head off, but then he lets out a tired sigh. He calls out, telling her to stop right there, adding that if she turns back now, their contract will be null and void, and if that happens, he won't be able to see her again, let alone teach her any magic. This news catches Erciel completely off guard. Kyle, however, remains firm and tells her to decide now. He asks if she's going to sign and learn his magic, or if she'll refuse and leave this room, for good. He makes it clear that if she chooses the latter, they'll never meet again. He asks her one last time if she wants to learn magic, or will she refuse and leave this room, after which they'll never see each other again. Kyle smiles inwardly, thinking this might be her last day of throwing tantrums and putting on an attitude, and he's looking forward to seeing her change for the better. He knows that while Iris has a rare SSS-class talent, if her character keeps causing trouble, he'll have no choice but to give up on her. He needs trustworthy colleagues and subordinates, not someone he has to constantly appease in every situation. Iris, on the other hand, finally gathers the courage to speak. After taking the pen in hand, she stubbornly declares that if she says she'll do something, she'll do it. With that, she finally begins reading the contract, albeit reluctantly. Kyle just gives her a smile and tells her to make sure she reads all the terms carefully before signing. In the contract, Party A is Kyle, while Party B represents Iris. As we look at the contract page, it's no wonder she's feeling reluctant to sign. The terms go way beyond what she can tolerate, and if she breaks any of the outlined rules, she'll face a stomachache as a penalty. The girl asks if stomachaches are really necessary, to which Kyle just smiles and says a little stomachache won't be so bad. Even Iris seems a bit surprised by this. She expected the penalty to be more dangerous, but this is actually something she thinks she can handle. So, eventually, she agrees to the terms, figuring that since the pain won't be severe, she doesn't have to worry too much about following everything strictly. But then, something suddenly strikes her, and she notices that the penalty for Rule 7 is pretty strict. She'll have her magic circle terminated if she doesn't follow it. She asks if she'll have to join the battle, and Kyle confirms it without hesitation, reminding her that if she's afraid of fighting, there's no need for her to learn stronger magic. He raises a question, asking why she even wants to learn magic. She goes quiet for a moment, then admits that she wants to be better than others because she enjoys beating and subduing them. She wants everyone to look up to her and admire her, and she's always loved being the center of attention. That's why she started studying magic in the first place. But lately, learning magic has become fun for its own sake. She started to enjoy learning new things and improving herself, so studying all night wouldn't even feel difficult. Kyle is blown away by her perspective, and a smirk spreads across his face as he sees the extraordinary desire to win and improve shining on her face. He's genuinely looking forward to seeing her transformation. You see, the best aptitude for becoming a mage doesn't depend on the amount of magical power one possesses, but rather on intellectual curiosity, eagerness to learn about magic, and a desire for power. Without these qualities, she won't become stronger. These are the traits that accompany Mana. She wants stronger magic and greater power, and with that resolve, she finally signs the contract. Both the contract and the pen magically float in the air and fly directly toward Kyle. He extends his hand for a shake, looking forward to working with her in the future, hoping that Iris will become a strong companion of his. For a moment, she remains quiet, but when the words truly sink in, she feels totally embarrassed at the prospect of being his companion. She freaks out so much that her long ponytails nearly come undone. Kyle tries to clear the air by reminding her that he didn't mean companions like that, but just as part of the team. However, Iris tells him he should have chosen his words more carefully. Now that they're done, she abruptly leaves the room, and it seems this clueless guy still has no idea why she acted that way. Even his knight standing behind him gets it, thinking Kyle could stand to be a bit more careful with his words, especially with a face as handsome like his. And then there's Erciel, who doesn't look too thrilled about the new competition in this unrequited love. Later that night, Erciel bluntly asks Kyle if he's planning to marry Iris. Of course, this unexpected question nearly chokes him, and he exclaims, asking what in the world she's talking about. He reminds her that Iris is only 11, and he himself is just 13. They're not even at the age to think about marriage. It seems Kyle still has no clue why Ursiel would ask him such a question, and he just wonders why everyone is so eager to get him married off so young. Ursiel then asks if he's really not thinking about it, to which he responds that he is not. Besides, he has way too much work to do right now. Meanwhile, in the back of his mind, he's thinking about how the world could end soon, and he doesn't have time for dating or marriage. So he simply tells this curious girl that he'll think about marriage and stuff like that after he's at least 18. Ursiel acknowledges this, then casually mentions that her mother is a beautiful woman, so she's sure she'll grow up to be beautiful too. With that, she dashes off, wishing him a good night. Kyle, left behind, feels both embarrassed and flustered, wondering why she would even bring something like that up. Kyle thinks about how kids in this era seem a bit more mature. Even Ursiel seems to be concerned about marriage already. He feels flustered as he considers that she's already quite pretty, but she'll likely become even more beautiful as she grows up. Then, he remembers something about her mother. Ursiel came from the Halaam Baron family, but after her family fell into ruin, they were stripped of their social status, and she was sold into slavery. Her father and brothers are dead, but her mother and sister are supposedly still alive. However, he doesn't know where they are. He figures Ursiel must be curious about her family, but she hasn't brought it up, which makes him wonder if she doesn't want to know where they are or if it's too painful for her to talk about. Whatever the case, he's determined to find out what's going on. A few days later, Kyle and his party take the carriage back to their mansion. As it rolls off, Kyle waves his final goodbyes to Count Neyron and his family. Iris feels a pang of sadness and wonders why Kyle had to leave so urgently. He could have stayed a few more days. Seeing her expression, the Count can't help but notice how much his daughter seems to like Kyle. He tries to cheer her up, telling her not to be too upset since Kyle will be back next month to teach her magic. Annoyed and embarrassed by her father's comment, Iris insists she doesn't like Kyle at all, just finds him annoying. She even tries to act nonchalant, saying that when he comes next month, she won't even open the door for him. But right at that moment, she feels a sharp ache in her stomach that makes her double over and collapse to the ground in pain. The Count remembers Kyle's words about how Iris should think 3 times before getting angry, otherwise her stomach would hurt. This makes him believe that the stomach ache she's feeling must be from the magic contract. He quickly tells her not to be angry and to think 3 times before saying anything irrational. If she holds back her anger, her stomach will stop hurting. But of course, how can she not be angry? She can't help but tear up and calls Kyle a jerk. She's so loud that even Kyle can hear her from his carriage, and he can't help but think someone is cursing him from afar. After that memorable stay at Count Neyron's mansion, Kyle and his friends finally return to Enfilim. The first thing we see is Kyle's bewildered expression. He looks shocked because his brother Abel has apparently bought a massive amount of grain from Enfilim for some unknown reason. Kyle's pretty sure he never mentioned anything about the dew famine to his brother, so he can't understand why Abel would suddenly buy grain. Abel explains that after listening to his little brother, he just had a strong gut feeling about it, so he decided to buy some too. When Kyle asks how much he bought, Abel gestures with his fingers, though it's hard to make out exactly what Abel is trying to say since the scene is blurred. But whatever amount it is, it's enough to shock Kyle to his core. He's stunned to learn that his brother has bought 100 times more grain than he did. Abel just says he had a feeling that the more he bought, the better it would be. Abel further reassures Kyle that even if he ends up suffering a loss on the grain, he won't blame his little brother since the decision to buy all that grain was entirely his own. Kyle acknowledges this and confirms that he's not really worried about that. In fact, he can't shake the thought of how Abel is going to rake in some serious profit. Out of curiosity, Kyle tells his brother that he's sure Abel could win anything just by buying a lottery ticket once. To which Abel replies that he's never thought of buying a lottery ticket because it doesn't suit someone of his status. Of course, he's never tried it since he's already quite rich. Kyle feels kind of jealous as he admires the foresight and luck his brother seems to have. The scene then transitions to the training grounds, where we see someone swinging a sword like a total Chad. This sword swinger is none other than Kyle's father, whose name I seem to have forgotten. Kyle arrives on the scene, looking as if he's been summoned by his father. His father asks if his trip to Enfilim went well, to which Kyle replies that he's grateful to Count Neyron for treating him so well, and that he had a comfortable stay. While wiping the sweat from his face, the father states that he just received a letter from Count Neyron, where he learned that Kyle promised to teach Lady Iris magic. Kyle acknowledges this and adds that it sort of just happened by fate, explaining that the daughter of that house is quite a unique and talented lady. His father believes this could be a good experience for him, so he encourages Kyle to try his best in teaching her. However, Kyle starts to imagine Iris's arrogant personality and isn't so sure he can actually have a good experience with her. Kyle further asks his father if the Count mentioned anything else besides the magic lessons. His father thinks for a moment, then recalls that Count Neyron did bring up the subject of Lady Iris and a possible engagement. However, he assures Kyle that it's not the Keltarian family tradition to get engaged so early, especially when neither of the elder sons are engaged yet. This comes as a big relief to Kyle, who's been trying to avoid the topic for a while. He agrees with his father, stating that there's still a lot he has to learn. He further reminds his father that he needs to make up for the time he lost due to his past illness. So he hopes his father can convince the Count to hold off on any engagement plans for now. His father agrees, and Kyle thanks him sincerely. Kyle lets out a sigh of relief, glad to realize there won't be any more engagement talks after this. His father calls out to him again, reminding him that he has no intention of forcing him into a political marriage. Kyle is puzzled by this statement and asks for clarification. His father then explains that he was never officially married to Kyle's mother, and it wasn't due to her low status but rather because she never intended to marry him. She went along with it, had children, but never formalized the marriage. Kyle's father tried to ask her about her reasons and reassured her that he didn't care about her social status, emphasizing that there wouldn't be any issues since she was going to give birth to the successor of the Keltarian family. He mentioned that even his subordinates supported his decision to marry her. However, Kyle's mother told him that she had been the late Marchioness's maid and wished to apologize to the former Marchioness. She expressed that she didn't think she could face the two young masters, who had just recently lost their mother. It seems like Marchioness was the former wife of Kyle's father, and that Abel and Adolf belonged to her. This explains why Kyle has white hair, while his older brothers have blonde hair. Marquis then tells his son that he loved his mother, which is why he was born. He advises Kyle that when choosing a spouse, he might consider the family's benefits, but he doesn't necessarily need to worry about differences in status. His father promises to support him in any case, no matter what. He assures his son that he means it. Whatever decision Kyle makes, he will be by his side to support him. All this talk leaves Kyle speechless, as it was totally unexpected from the Marquis. He wonders if the Marquis actually has a doting father's heart after all, and if he feels some sympathy for him. However, this can't be true, because the youngest child is usually never considered a candidate for succession due to their lack of influence. If the youngest child marries the daughter of a powerful family and gains great influence, there is a high possibility of conflict arising over succession. His father is a man who values lineage success above family relations, and until the succession structure is completely stabilized, Kyle wants to avoid getting into trouble. Now, he understands that this is what his father is concerned about. Kyle finally agrees with his father and tries to brush it off by saying that since he is young, he doesn't know much about complicated matters. For now, it's important to remain as the harmless youngest child. By the way, I finally remembered that our boy's father's name is Remton. Anyhow, Kyle asks if he has permission to leave since they've discussed everything he came for, and he needs to go study at the library. When Remton gives Kyle permission to leave, our boy begins to stride out of the place promptly. As Remton watches Kyle leave, he reflects on how quickly his son changed the subject when his mother was mentioned. What bothers him even more is that Kyle doesn't even call him father. He pulls out a pendant, and as we take a closer look, we see a photo of Kyle's mother, Aisha. Gazing at her image, Remton wonders if she too harbored resentment toward him. Meanwhile, as Kyle walks through the quiet corridor, he replays his father's words about supporting him in his mind. For a brief moment, he considers whether Remton might actually care about him. But just as he is thinking it through, he snaps back to reality, suddenly remembering he forgot to tell his father about the loot he got from the dungeon. He completely overlooked it because of the topic his father brought up. Kyle wonders if he should go back and share everything, but the thought of talking to his father again leaves him hesitant. He had instructed Leonhardt not to inform the Marquis about the dungeon until Kyle reported in himself, and now our boy is curious to see if Leonhardt will honor his word or prioritize his loyalty to the Marquis. Still uncertain about whether he should report to his father or handle the matter on his own, his mind is conflicted between heading to the library or talking about the dungeon. As he wrestles with these thoughts, he unexpectedly bumps into someone. The man Kyle collided with apologizes, but as this newcomer takes a closer look, he realizes it's Kyle. It doesn't take long for Kyle to recognize that the person in front of him is Duke Seltarian, the third son of the family. Kyle finds it amusing that just as the topic of their mother comes up, he coincidentally runs into his third brother. He can't help but notice how much taller the third son has gotten since the last time they met. Even though Duke is only 2 years older than Kyle, he still is in much better shape. Kyle figures it must be due to the training he's received as a knight from a young age. He's heard that the third son became a junior officer not long ago. The big bro Duke then promptly asks Kyle why he's here, given that their father has explicitly instructed him not to approach the main building. Kyle explains that he was released from detention by their father's decision after he recognized his achievements in serving the citizens. Duke is clearly unsure of what that means, so he bluntly asks Kyle what he's planning to cook next, and what kind of trouble he's trying to stir up by pretending to be mature this time. Well, there you go again. This guy seems like a big bully, bro. To understand why the third son seems so hostile toward Kyle, we learn that the Duke resented his little brother, Kyle, who was 2 years younger, had always caused their mother, Aisha, constant worry. Her health declined from the stress of fearing that Kyle might die young. One day, while the Duke was grappling with guilt over their mother's coldness, Kyle stormed in and casually asked why their mother was so quiet. That's when the third son broke the news to him that their mother had passed away. Kyle, who had been spoiled and somewhat insensitive back then, just chuckled in response, remarking that he never thought she'd die before him. This infuriated the third son, who lashed out, pinning Kyle to the wall and yelling at him for speaking so carelessly about someone who had cared about him for so long. The Duke blamed Kyle for their mother's death, but Kyle got angry and jerked his brother's hands away in order to free himself. He made it clear that if their mother died because of him, then whose fault was it that he could die at any moment? He believed it was somewhat his mother's fault for bringing him into the world with this kind of body. The Duke's patience wore thin, and he punched Kyle hard in the face, sending him crashing to the ground. He called Kyle worse than an animal and said that he had only held back all this time because of their mother, but he wouldn't let Kyle cross any more limits now. With that, he decided to walk away after stating that he does not have any younger siblings anymore. In the present moment, Kyle finally understands why the Duke hates him so much, and he is sure that this kind of conflict won't be resolved easily. The Duke continues his taunts, calling Kyle out for pretending to be mature. He tells him to just get lost and never come back to the main building again. Even though Kyle understands the reasons behind his brother's hostility, he isn't going to act like a punching bag for his insults. So, he responds to his big brother by saying that since the head of the household has officially released him from his confinement and allowed him to enter the main building, what the Duke is demanding is basically a challenge to the authority of the house's head. To drive his point home, Kyle asks if the Duke's orders are more important than those of the head of the household. This remark not only silences the Duke for a moment but also annoys him to no end. He balls up his fist in frustration, ready to hit Kyle, but his attempt fails when Adolf suddenly appears and grabs the Duke's hand mid-air before it can connect with Kyle's face. Kyle is shocked to see Adolf here because he didn't even notice him coming. Meanwhile, the Duke looks completely bewildered at his big brother's sudden appearance. Adolf tells the Duke that hitting young people isn't fitting for someone like him, especially not in the main building where their father is present. The third son's eyes well up with fear, and he doesn't waste any time before apologizing. But Adolf tells him to apologize to Kyle, not him. Not surprisingly, the Duke refuses to apologize to Kyle. After offering a half-hearted apology to his big brother again, he decides to take his leave, leaving Kyle in silence, completely confused about what just happened. Adolf reflects on how stubborn the Duke is and wonders who he takes after to be that way. Meanwhile, Kyle can't help but shoot dubious looks at Adolf for conveniently popping up out of nowhere, making him wonder if Adolf had been watching them from afar all along. Anyhow, Adolf asks Kyle if he's hurt anywhere and assures him that the Duke doesn't usually act like that. Kyle acknowledges this and admits he has made a lot of mistakes in the past, so it's understandable that the Duke doesn't believe him. That's when Adolf puts his hand on Kyle's tiny shoulder and leans in closer to whisper in his ear that he trusts his little brother. Kyle thanks his big bro outwardly, but inwardly, this is exactly what he wanted to hear. Adolf then reveals that the Duke has been learning swordsmanship from him lately, but no matter how much the Duke trains, his skills don't seem to improve. It's like he's reached his limit due to his average talent in aura. With that said, Adolf reminds Kyle that he's a mage who has overcome his Hermamu disability and is now on a completely different level than the average Duke. The fact that Adolf is saying all this shows he finds Kyle more interesting and wants to teach him swordsmanship instead of the Duke. He suggests that since the Duke and Kyle don't get along well, he can teach them separately. Kyle is surprised to hear that the Duke is learning swordsmanship from Adolf, but he can also sense that Adolf intends for him to clash with the Duke, and he sees right through it. So Kyle just laughs it off, saying he's still only in the first circle and has a lot more to learn in the future. For now, he wants to head to the library, so he takes his leave. As he walks, he still wonders why Adolf is interested in teaching an average person like Duke anything. You see, Adolf is definitely not the type to take good care of his younger brother, and there's no reason for him to go through all that trouble just to provoke Kyle. In the Fantasy Defense's original storyline, the Duke doesn't survive any of the routes after the rebellion. And was it just a coincidence that Adolf killed the Duke in every route? It seems unlikely. This makes Kyle certain that the Duke might be hiding a secret he doesn't know about. The scene then transitions to the beautiful countryside, a serene place where I wish to live my life. There, we meet Leonhardt in casual clothes, carrying a parcel with him. To find out what he's doing away from the mansion, the scene flashes back a bit to when he had a conversation with Remton. He reveals to his senior that Kyle did well in Enfilum. Remton acknowledges this, and reflects how this report also matches what Count Neyron mentioned in his letter. He then asks Leonhardt if anything else interesting happened on the way there, or during the return to the mansion. The knight goes quiet for a moment, hesitating to respond. He remembers the promise he made with Kyle about keeping the dungeon and the loot a secret for now, so he responds accordingly that there wasn't anything else noteworthy either. They only encountered a few low-level monsters, but they were not that threatening. The head of the family smiles to hear this and tells the knight to take good care of Kyle. He feels relieved that someone as capable as Leonhardt is by Kyle's side. Back in the present, Leonhardt reflects on how he ended up prioritizing Kyle's orders over his master's. We also learn that he's here to meet his father. At that moment, a man calls out to him, and when Leonhardt looks up, he spots his father in front of him. Once they both sit down to catch up, his father asks how long he'll be on vacation this time, to which Leonhardt replies that he'll be free for about half a day. His father is not really thrilled to hear this, since it's been forever when they spent time together. Leonhardt responds that he'll come whenever he has time. His father then mentions that he's heard a rumor that the little young Master Kyle has suddenly matured a bit these days. This unexpected question startles Leonhardt at first, but he quickly agrees with his father, claiming that Kyle has indeed become much more dignified lately. He further mentions that he didn't expect to end up escorting Kyle for this long. Initially, his plan after escorting Lord Kyle once was to return to the Knights of the Keltarian and continue his work. His father looks at him and can read the confusion on his face, so he tries to open up. He asks his son if his thoughts have changed since then. To this, Leonhardt admits he's not quite sure what he wants to do. His mind then wanders back to a time when Kyle decided to provide him with a new sword. Kyle tells him that the sword he used before was too weak to handle the aura of an upper-level expert knight. If he poured everything he had into it, the sword would break, so he always had to suppress his aura to some extent. Leonhardt asks how he knows about this, to which Kyle replies that he has studied similar topics because mages need a basic understanding of not only magic, but also aura. But truth to be told, our boy learned all this after playing this game all day. Kyle then further states that Leonhardt has been lacking a new sword for quite some time now. Since he was busy with his guard duty all the time, he didn't get the chance to get a new one, so Kyle always felt bad about that. But now that Leonhardt has a new sword, he feels quite relieved. Leonhardt is rendered speechless in response, and quickly assures Kyle that even if what he said is true, he shouldn't feel bad just because of him. But Kyle wins over Leonhardt's heart even more when he flashes a smile and expresses how deeply he cares about his knight. Those words, "my knight," strike a deep chord with Leonhardt, as he'd never heard anything so heartfelt from a Marquis before. In the present, Leonhardt reflects on how Marquis Rempton has many loyal aides who have been by his side since his youth. Leonhardt has always felt a bit left out, knowing he can't truly find his place among them. Whether it's skill level or his bond with the Marquis, he feels he has nothing that compares to those around him. But that's when his father clears up his confusion, encouraging him to just do whatever he wants, and if he wants to stick with Kyle, he should gladly do so. His father reminds him of how it was the same when he joined the Knights Academy. Although they belonged to a baron family, they were nobles only in name. The family's circumstances weren't good back then, and they didn't have the luxury of hiring a proper swordsmanship instructor. However, when Leonhardt turned 15, he took the entrance exam on his own, passed it, and became a knight. His father reminds him that the answer is already in his heart. He just hasn't been able to say it yet. He tells Leonhardt to feel confident in whatever decision he makes, assuring him that the Marquis would understand the reasons behind his choice. Then his father asks if he's the only knight the Marquis has. Leonhardt replies that there isn't a simple answer to that question, but he does agree that for Kyle, he is the only knight they have. Just as they're chatting away, they hook a fish, and it looks like they're going to have a good catch for dinner after all. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the first thing we see is Adolf's shocked face when he learns that Abel came to recruit Kyle. He quickly tosses the book away he was holding and asks Kyle if he agreed to it, to which Kyle reassures him positively, saying if that were the case, he wouldn't have come here to report this news. Kyle feels annoyed at how Abel tossed the book aside like this, but he does not express his disapproval out loud. Instead, he responds to his brother's question, explaining that he was just as surprised when brother Abel suddenly approached him and invited him to join. He admits that, given the big age difference, brother Abel had never spoken to him before, so it was a little intimidating. Adolf then responds with a cold, annoyed tone, saying there's no way Abel would approach him without some ulterior motive. He goes on, claiming that Abel has always been like that and never moves unless there's a benefit involved. He's sure Abel must have noticed Kyle learning magic, which is why he's now acting like an older brother. Adolf reminds Kyle that during the entire time he was sick, Abel never once came to check on him. As Adolf continues trying to persuade Kyle by pointing out how awful Abel's character is, our boy is left speechless, not sure what to say. After losing one of his greatest men, Baron Jerome gone, losing another capable person would be a shame, so he can't afford to lose Kyle to Abel. Even though Kyle is still just a one-circle mage, Adolf sees tons of potential in him. Kyle, meanwhile, smiles inwardly, noticing how Adolf criticizes Abel for not visiting him while he was sick, when the same could be said for Adolf, who also never came to check on him. Kyle reflects on how both of his brothers only seem to approach him when they need something, but he realizes he's guilty of the same thing, especially since he wants to defeat the Dark Immortal threatening the safety of the continent. So the power of the renowned swordsmanship of Keltarion is absolutely necessary for that. However, for the survival of their family, Adolf should be the one to take a hit. Adolf mentions that Abel has been acting shady lately, noting rumors that he's bought a lot of grain from Enfilum. It's puzzling, and he can't figure out why Abel would need such large quantities. Kyle adds that he too bought grain for his magic research, suggesting there's a chance Abel might also be trying to study magic like him. But Adolf quickly reminds him that Abel doesn't have a magic circle, We can tell that Kyle is just bluffing about the whole magic learning thing, but it seems Adolf has bought the lie and thinks that Kyle just doesn't realize that Abel doesn't have a circle. Kyle keeps playing along, apologizing and saying he doesn't know much about Abel. Anyway, Adolf grabs the book Kyle tossed earlier and tells his brother that they need to grow even more in the future. He asks Kyle to help his big brother grow up quickly. Kyle grins widely as he grabs the book and agrees, saying he'll definitely help his big brother. With that, he decides to head out for now. Meanwhile, outside the door, we see Erciel standing there. Just as she's waiting, Daisy arrives and immediately starts explaining herself. She tells Erciel that her family has been taken hostage by Adolf, and if she doesn't do as he says, he'll do anything to achieve his goals. So, she felt she had no choice but to comply. But Erciel flatly tells her not to show up in front of Lord Kyle again. Daisy grows impatient, and her face twists with annoyance as she reminds Erciel that since she doesn't have any family, she does not have to worry about it either, which explains why Erciel can't understand her predicament. Erciel stands her ground and does not let Daisy's words sway her, while Daisy storms off after dropping those brutal bombs. Right at that moment, Erciel's familiar arrives after sensing the emotional turmoil she's feeling inside, since her pet is closely tied to her emotions. The little familiar tries to cheer her up, but Erciel reassures her that she isn't offended by anything Daisy said. As long as she has Kyle by her side, she doesn't feel alone at all. The little furball asks her about her family, and Erciel replies that they're hard to find, and she doesn't even know if they're alive. Besides, she doesn't want to cause any more trouble for Lord Kyle. She knows what happens to the women who are sold off, and if she hadn't met Kyle back then, she might not have been here to see this day. So, she's determined to become stronger for Lord Kyle, the one who saved her. The next scene takes us to the training grounds, where Kyle can be seen working his magic mojo. With fire dancing over the palms of his hands, he unleashes an attack known as Fire Arrow. The fire blast is powerful enough to scatter the target into bits and pieces. Well, this was only possible because Kyle has finally reached 100% proficiency with this Fire Arrow spell, which is a second circle magic. It's like hitting bingo. Not only did he learn the Fire Arrow spell, but he also mastered how to use second circle magic. Erciel and her little furball are pretty glad about the progress Kyle has made with all the rigorous training he's been going through. So she thinks he's at least entitled to a little bit of rest now. But he catches her off guard when he reveals that he still has some important stuff to take care of. His next move is to visit a place called Prenus to recruit a new talent he has in mind. When his knight finds out where Kyle plans to go, he responds rather dismissively. Seems like Kyle isn't sure why Leonhard is so against visiting Prenus. Well, this only makes Leonhard even more annoyed, thinking his master is just being obtuse intentionally about the situation with Prenus. But it looks like Kyle actually knows what's up. Apparently Prenus is a city of desires and pleasures. Drinking, auctions, gambling, prostitution, these are the main things running the city's economy. If you're a spoiled adult with a lot of money and unethical desires to satisfy, it's basically heaven for those people. But for someone like Kyle, who's still a minor, it's strictly forbidden if he starts chasing holes to mine. Furthermore, the reason Leonhard is so dead set against his master visiting that place is because he hasn't forgotten what happened last time. The last time Kyle went there, he gambled in a casino and lost everything, quite literally. He even lost his clothes. Hell, he almost got sold to the slave market. That's how balls deep he was in that mess. But after that, Kyle reflected on the irrationality of his actions and made a vow to never visit that place again. Some guys in the comments were saying I was roasting the OG Kyle unnecessarily because he's supposed to be the traumatized victim. Like, bro, just because you're about to die from an illness doesn't give you the right to act like a spoiled brat for no reason. Now explain to me why it was so damn necessary for him to gamble his life away at a place totally forbidden to minors like him. Even our boy shares the same thoughts. Those blunders the OG Kyle made still haunt him to this day. So he tries to convince his knight that he's not going to indulge in any desires. Rather, he has a quick errand at the arena. But of course, given Kyle's track record, it's only natural for Leonhard to get the wrong idea and assume our boy is just visiting so he can bet on gladiators. As far as Leonhard is concerned, the arena is even worse. Really sorry, but he makes it clear he won't let Kyle ruin the reputation he's built over the past few months. So he sternly suggests Kyle stays in the mansion. With those final words, he leaves the room, leaving our boy grumbling and expressing how badly he wants to get to Prenus somehow. Let's not forget about Erciel, who has a totally different reaction when she finds out what kind of place Prenus really is. If anything, she seems jealous and mad at Kyle for thinking of exploring other holes instead of making her the real goal. Seeing her sour reaction, Kyle can do nothing but slump further in his chair. Initially, he only had Leonhard to deal with, but now Erciel seems like another person he has to convince. With barely any time on his hands, he has no clue how to convince them quickly. After all, this is the only chance he has to track down his target, a guy named Saron. Let's get some context on who this guy actually is. Apparently, Saron is a plausible protagonist character of fantasy defense. Being the main character, he has decent stats and potential to rise even further. His default class is Swordsman, and he can advance in other skill trees, but if you focus all his learning potential on swordsman, he can become a powerhouse unmatched anywhere on this continent. Since Seiran is born to be the greatest, recruiting him as soon as possible is the better option. He could become an irreplaceable ally in subduing the Dark Immortal later. As for where Seiran is now, he's in the Prinas Underground Arena. Promptly, the scene cuts to the underground arena in question. The gladiators who are supposed to fight have started to show up. With battles about to start, the audience goes bonkers as they can finally make their tickets worth it. The gladiators seem to be chickening out because they're about to face the undefeated champion of the Prinas Arena. The lore, the legend of the underground world, who goes by the title Sword Demon. This boy has an uncanny and unsettling presence about him. He is scrawny and exudes gloomy, melancholic vibes. Even the guys watching the so-called Sword Demon for the first time are disappointed by the scrawny warrior in front of them. They find it laughable that this kid even qualified to enter the gladiator arena, let alone fight 3 men at once. Then one guy reveals an interesting tidbit. While the kid looks scrawny and weak, he's climbed this far with just that one sword he's holding, making him a force to reckon with. Another guy assures his friend not to be fooled by the kid's appearance. After all, he's come this far wielding only that one sword, which explains how terrifying he must be. Rumor has it his personality changes the moment he grabs his sword. And just like the rumors say, bro goes berserk and lunges at the 3 poor bastards cowering for their lives. They literally scatter as the sword demon chases them down. He looks like a bloodthirsty fiend wanting to devour his enemies alive. He finally catches one guy and slays him on the spot. With blood splattering everywhere, the other 2 lambs can only pray for a miracle. The sword demon then turns his attention to the other 2, who had lost their will to fight even before the match started. Predictably, these 2 poor bastards meet the same bloody fate as their friend. I feel bad for these guys. They literally died unnecessarily. But it seems like this bloodshed wasn't all that unnecessary, because the violence-loving, war-craving audience is loving it. They hadn't expected less from the sword demon. It's always one victory after another. The matches might seem predictable, but the way the sword demon slaughters his enemies makes it damn entertaining. Meanwhile, the sword demon craves more violence and wants to spill more blood. There's this lust for blood taking over his head, urging him to shed it all, but he suddenly snaps out of it, coughing violently and losing his grip on the sword. A while later, he can be seen caged and confined with shackles over his hands. He is breathing heavily, and yet he doesn't seem to catch his breath with all the pain coursing through his body. The guards watching him notices him squirm, making them afraid that this kid might die. The other guy decides to just leave him alone. The reason this guy is in pain is that he hasn't fully recovered yet, so even moving around hurts. But once he's healed, he'll be fine. It's kind of morbid to think that, out of all people, this young kid is the sword demon. Seriously, these guys are forced to ponder where they even find someone like him. Rumor has it he's been wandering from arena to arena as a kid with no place to call home. No one knows if his parents died or abandoned him. The kid himself barely even remembers his own name. One guy is surprised that a wild beast like this even has a name. When he asks what the sword demon's name is, the scene shifts to our boy, who says his name is Seiran. He's 13. But in Prinas, he's known as the sword demon. He's explaining all this to Ursiel, trying to convince her to let him go. Seiran could be a huge asset for Kyle if he manages to recruit him, so he wants to get him on his side before leaving the arena. With Seiran, that'd be the 4th member of Kyle's talent acquisition project. The scene shifts to the dining area, where a spread of food is laid out. While Leonhardt's digging in, our duo anxiously wait for him to eat the food, which they've slipped some sleeping potion into. They've made sure the knight will be knocked out deep when they sneak out tonight. Seeing Leonhardt finally gulp down the food relaxes them a bit. It's dead of night, and Kyle and Ursiel sneak quietly around the mansion, careful not to draw attention as they step outside. The carriages are already out front, and with Leonhardt supposedly asleep, all they have to do is leave the mansion grounds. Now that Kyle thinks about it, there's no real need to sneak like thieves since Leonhardt isn't around. But then, out of nowhere, said Leonhardt is literally standing right behind them. He's already caught on. Hell, he even knows the food he ate was drugged. Kyle's freaking out seeing his knight awake, but we all know a sleeping potion isn't enough for Leonhardt. By now, Kyle's forced to admit he severely underestimated this high-ranking expert knight. He made that sleeping drug himself, and infused magic to make it even more potent. But seeing his knight survive that stuff just shows how resilient this man actually is. Back on track, Leonhardt expresses disappointment that his master planned all this behind his back. He's even more disappointed in Ursiel for tagging along on the trip to Prinas. But before he can throw more shade and scold the poor girl even more, Kyle stops him, clarifying that Ursiel didn't do anything wrong, as he was the one who convinced her to come. So it's not her fault, and Leonhardt shouldn't be scolding her. The concerned knight sighs, mildly dejected, and reveals the real reason he's against this trip. Apparently, Prinas' security has gotten worse since Kyle last visited. In fact, the city is now the continent's worst den of vice, especially not a place for a young girl like Ursiel. Going there is just plain reckless. Of course, Kyle is more than capable of protecting Ursiel and himself, capable enough to blow up the entire city if he needs to. But Leonhardt isn't sure Kyle really wants to attract unnecessary attention like that. Hearing this, my guy cracks a faint smile because, yeah, he does want to cause a huge mess in the city, though he isn't sure if he can do it alone. If he has to be honest, his real goal is to destroy Prenus's gladiator arena. He wants to free the gladiator slaves trapped in the underground cells. That's his only motivation for going to Prenus. But to pull it off, he needs Leonhardt by his side. His decision to go Prenus might sound sudden, but he's been planning to free the slaves for a long time. It bothers him endlessly to think about kids his age suffering like that. That's why he desperately wants Leonhardt to join this noble cause and help him through it. Of course, the duty-bound knight can't help but feel a huge amount of admiration for his master. Being righteous is Leonhardt's biggest weakness, and that's exactly what Kyle's playing on. Since Bro is already planning to recruit Saron, saying he wants to free the slaves isn't exactly a lie either. A few days later, we find ourselves in a gambling arena, where Kyle is winning one bet after another like it's nobody's business. With all the games he's won, he's already stashed a ton of chips. He's having the time of his life, winning every game one after another. Even the dealers have been switched 3 times, but Kyle remains undefeated thanks to his raw talent. The reason they are here is the fact that they weren't allowed to go directly to the underground gladiator arena. So first they made a stop at the casino. But in the casino, Leonhardt forbade Urziel from tagging along. So now Kyle waits in the casino for the perfect opportunity to sneak into the arena. Just as Kyle expects, a fat opportunity literally walks into the casino. This fat cat's name is Riddle Remington, Lord of Prenus and son of Viscount Remington. After hearing about Kyle's winning streak, this fat cat suggests going all in and betting the highest amount. But my guy pretends he's lost interest in card games and wants to bet on something more thrilling. Something with bloodshed, screams, and a whole lot of pain. Everyone knows there's only one place like that, so the fat cat suggests Kyle follow him. As they head out, Kyle tells his knight to claim all the winnings before they leave the casino. Meanwhile, Riddle's butler worries about his master risking everything. But Riddle's already confident about the bets he's about to make. First, he'll let Kyle win a few rounds to make him feel in control. Only then will he plan to make his opponent lose it all in the end. Seems like Riddle already knows a lot about our boy. He's heard the rumors that Kyle has matured, but seeing him bet recklessly like this, Riddle's sure he's still the same as ever. We flash back to a time when Riddle was preparing and having company with his father. His father, Viscount Remington, Lord of Prenus, warned him Kyle was coming, though the reason for the visit was a mystery. The son was sure Kyle was just back to gamble like always. He assured his father he'd take care of that prick without breaking a sweat. Rumors of Kyle's change were nothing but rumors. He was born a troublemaker and people don't change overnight. The likely scenario is that he just got bored of playing nice at home and couldn't resist going out. With that in mind, he assured his equally fat father he'd take care of Kyle. First, he'd let our boy win a few games to get him hooked, then strip him of everything he owns, including his dignity. Back to the present, Riddle strategizes as they arrive at their destination. Before entering, he turns and reveals not everyone's allowed inside. Only Kyle is privileged enough to enter the underground gladiator arena. He further assures that what our boy is about to see will be worth it. Well, my guy is ready for the surprises ahead. When he says that, he really means it. Both boys are actually thinking of surprising each other, but we all know it's Kyle who's going to win this surprise game.